Chair, the meeting is now being recorded.
Thank you. I would like to call the regular meeting of March 24, 2025 to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Will the secretary please call roll?
Commissioner Benninger,
Present.
Commissioner Escamilla, Commissioner Leo, Commissioner Pham,
Here.
Commissioner Wu,
Here.
Vice Chair Ramos,
Present.
Chair Oliva.
Here.
Chair, quorum has been reached at 5:35.
Before we begin, I would like to remind my fellow commissioners to turn your microphones on when speaking and off when non-speaking. And when speaking, please place your microphone about 4 inches away from you. Thank you. Members of the public may attend public planning commission meetings in person or virtually via Zoom. I now invite the commission secretary to please describe the way the public can access and participate in this meeting.
This meeting is being live streamed via our portal at www.sana-ana.primegov.com/public/portal and to YouTube at www.youtube.com/City of Santa Ana videos. If you would like to provide public comment, you may do so in the following ways. Join the meeting via Zoom. When the item you wish to comment on is being discussed, please enter the meeting ID number 857-3948-2086. Select the hand icon to indicate that you would like to speak. Once called upon, remember to unmute yourself and state your name for the record. You can also join the meeting by calling 669-900-6833. Enter meeting ID number 857-394-82086. When the item that you would like to comment on is being discussed, press 9 to let us know you would like to speak. You will be called upon by the last 3 digits of your phone number. After you're called upon, you may press 6 to unmute yourself. For those who are attending this meeting in person and would like to provide public comment, please fill out our request to speak form and turn it into the recording secretary. All speakers will have 3 minutes to speak. We will alert you when your time is up.
Moving on to public comments on non-agenda or non-public speaking items. Secretary, does anyone wish to speak?
If you're attending this meeting in person and would like to comment on non-agenda or non-public hearing items, please fill out a request to speak form and turn it into the secretary. If you're participating via Zoom and would like to comment on non-agenda or non-public hearing items, please select the hand icon to let us know you would like to comment. If you're calling in and would like to comment on non-agenda or non-public hearing items, please dial 9 and then 6 to unmute yourself. Chair, we do not have any speakers.
Thank you. Moving on to the consent calendar. Is there a motion to approve item A, minutes from March 10, 2025, and item B, excused absences?
I move item A and B on the consent calendar.
I have a motion from Commissioner Wu. Is there a second?
I second that.
And I have a second from Commissioner Benninger. Secretary, please call for a roll call vote.
Commissioner Benninger,
Aye.
Commissioner Escamilla, Commissioner Leo, Commissioner Pham,
Aye.
Commissioner Wu,
Aye.
Vice Chair Ramos,
Aye.
Chair Oliva.
Aye.
Motion approved by majority vote with Commissioner Escamilla and Commissioner Leo absent.
Thank you. That concludes the consent calendar items. Moving on to the public hearing. I will now review the process for the public hearing so that everyone knows what to expect. Staff will provide a presentation and answer questions from the commission. Then the public hearing will be opened. The applicant will be given the opportunity to speak, limited to 15 minutes. Members of the public will be given the opportunity to comment, limited to 3 minutes. The applicant will be given the opportunity to respond to comments made by the public, limited to 5 minutes. Then the public hearing will be closed. Discussion will return to the commission with formal action taken to approve, deny, or continue review of the application. Please consider the following suggestions when organizing your comments. Please state your name and address, strictly voluntary. State whether you support, oppose, or are neutral to the proposal. Your statement should include all pertinent facts within your knowledge. Please note, decisions on this matter is final unless appealed within 10 days by any interested individual or party. Recommendations on this item will be forwarded to the City Council at a later date for final determination. This is the time and place for site plan review number 2025-01, vesting tentative track map number 2025-01, and density bonus agreement number 2025-01 for the property located within the general commercial zone and within the active urban district of the Metro East Mixed-Use Overlay Zone. Before we begin, do any commissioners have anything they wish to disclose with regard to this item? Seeing none, Pedro Gomez will provide a brief presentation.
Good evening, Madam Chair and fellow commissioners. This item is a request for approval of site plan review number 2025-01, vesting tentative track map number 2025-01, and density bonus agreement number 2025-01 to allow the construction of a multifamily residential development to include 80 townhomes and 6 duplexes at the property located at 2020 East First Street. The development will include 5 units designated for very low income households, earning 30 to 50% of the area median income. And the project will utilize 1 concession to deviate from development standards. Staff is recommending approval of the applicant's request as the project is consistent with various goals and policies of the general plan, and because the project contributes to the community's affordable and market rate ownership housing stock.
Pedro, if I can interrupt you real quick, I'd like to make note that Commissioner Escamilla has joined us at 5:41.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The site is approximately 3.72 acres in size, and it's located on East First Street, adjacent to the East First Street and Golden Circle Drive intersection. It has a general plan designation of District Center Medium High, and it's zoned General Commercial or C2. It's also located within the Metro East Mixed Use Overlay Zone or MEMU within the active urban area. The site is surrounded by an eating establishment and commercial uses to the north, multifamily residences to the east, a school in the city of Tustin to the south, and medical office and recreation field to the west. For Planning Commission's awareness, the project meets the definition of a housing development project as defined by the California Government Code. As such, the application is being submitted pursuant to the Housing Crisis Act of 2019 or California Senate Bill SB 330 and would be subject to the limitations imposed by SB 330. SB 330 made numerous changes to existing state law and adopted the Housing Crisis Act of 2019. The changes proposed by SB 330 became effective on January 1st, 2020, and established a statewide housing emergency until January 1st, 2025. On January 1st, 2022, the Housing Crisis Act was extended until 2023 with the passage of Senate Bill 8. On May 30th, 2024, the applicant submitted an SB 330 preliminary application, which was deemed complete after a few back and forths on June 27th, 2024. For this project, the applicant is proposing to demolish an existing 5-story office building in order to construct an 86-unit for-sale multifamily community, which includes 80 3-story townhouse units, including 12 2-bedroom units, 34 3-bedroom units, and 34 4-bedroom units. It would also include 6 4-story duplexes, all 3-bedroom units with a 210 square foot flex space. There would be approximately 9,700 square feet of publicly accessible open space, or 6% of the site, and about 13,000 square feet of common open space. The proposed units would include a side-by-side and tandem car garage, would range in size between 1,200 square feet and 2,400 square feet approximately, and would include a kitchen, bedrooms, bathrooms, common living areas, and a minimum of 90 square feet of private open space. The applicant is also proposing a subdivision for condominium purposes for the sale of the individual townhomes. And lastly, the applicant is requesting the density bonus agreement to memorialize the concession to deviate from the publicly accessible open space, which is a development standard for the project. And here we have a site photo of the existing office space. And the next couple of slides provide the site plan, landscaping, open space, and elevations. Here we have the site plan, and we can see that there's 2 vehicle entrances along First Street, one of which is a shared entry with the First Point residential community to the east. The 6 duplexes with flex office space are fronting East First Street, and the rest of the townhome buildings are located towards the rest of the site. The improvements would include a private drive or street and would provide circulation throughout the community with the points of exit at either vehicle entrances. And as shown on Exhibit 6 of the Planning Commission agenda, the publicly accessible open space is designed as a public plaza along First Street, which will lead to a private courtyard that would serve as common open space. Again, there's approximately 9,700 square feet of the project site, or 6% of the total site, that would be dedicated to the publicly accessible open space. And collectively, the common open space provided is 13,179 square feet, which exceeds the minimum required by the MIMU. And as can be seen on the conceptual landscape plan on the screen, the courtyard features seating areas, picnic tables, shade structures, enhanced paseos for pedestrian connectivity, and the main entryway would be enhanced with decorative paving, and landscaping would carefully be curated to enhance the aesthetics of the overall site. And on this slide, we have the proposed elevations for the duplex or twoplex as called on the project plans. The project incorporates contemporary architecture consistent with many multifamily mixed-use residential communities in the area and under construction currently. The overall design, massing, materials, and architectural features are intended to be compatible with, yet distinct from, the existing multifamily residences to the east, which was the First Point project that I noted earlier. As noted, these duplexes would include the flex office space, so they've been designed to incorporate a storefront style facade that enhances pedestrian engagement and activates the public realm. And you can see that on the front elevation here. On this next slide, we have one version, or Scheme 1 as it's called on the plans, of the sixplex building. Again, the contemporary architectural style is categorized by a combination of brick veneer and lap siding, complemented by wood canopies and metal awnings throughout the site. Throughout the development, the cohesive contemporary standards and aesthetics maintained throughout use siding, brick veneer, and concrete flat tile roofing, ensuring visual consistency across the site while integrating the modern design elements. And here we have the left and right elevation of the same scheme for the sixplex. And there's a Scheme 2 that shows different color variations for the sixplex. We have the front and rear elevations on the screen. And then the left and right elevations. The project also proposes an eightplex building with 8 units, and this is the Scheme 1. Again, the front and rear elevation. The left and right. So pursuant to the Santa Ana Municipal Code and sections 2.3 and 8.1 of the Metro East Mixed Use Overlay, approval of a site plan review by the Planning Commission is required for any project wishing to develop per the MIMU standards. Planning staff has reviewed the project and finds that it complies with the majority of the development standards applicable to the proposed project, with the exception of the publicly accessible open space for which the applicant is requesting the concession through the state density bonus law. Specifically, the project has been carefully designed to ensure safety, privacy, and functionality for future residences and the surrounding community. It incorporates residential units and flex spaces, allowing owners the opportunity to live and work in the same space. And then the design strengthens its connection to the public realm, enhancing pedestrian accessibility and connectivity. And the mass and scale are comparable to that of the neighboring properties. The applicant is also seeking approval of the vesting tentative tract map to subdivide for condominium purposes. The request would vest the right to proceed with development in substantial compliance with the ordinances, policies, and standards in effect at the time of the vesting map is deemed complete. Staff is recommending approval of the vesting tentative tract map because the proposed map is consistent with the general plan, as the vision for the district center medium-high designation is to establish a distinct urban, retail, residential mixed-use, and employment center that is well connected to public transportation. And moreover, the project can accommodate the proposed improvements with the exception of the publicly accessible open space, which we've already discussed. The project conforms to the development standards of the zone. And the project is not anticipated to have any adverse environmental impacts to fish or wildlife populations, as this is an urbanized area and it's developed with an office and surface parking lot. And the purpose of the state density bonus law is to encourage development and availability of affordable housing units. The law allows developers to seek incentives or concessions and waivers, which are essentially variances from development standards that would help the project be built without significant burden and without detriment to public health. Pursuant to the California Government Code, a local jurisdiction is limited in its ability to deny the requested incentives, concessions, and waivers. For this project, the developer is not requesting a state density bonus for additional units, but would avail themselves for the incentive, concession, and waivers that are required to be provided for the project with the requisite affordability. Due to the project's 6% affordability, the developer can seek one density bonus incentive/concession and unlimited waivers. And then again, as we previously discussed, the applicant is requesting the concession for the publicly accessible open space. The total public open space, total publicly accessible open space required for the project is equal to 15% of the lot, or approximately 24,000 square feet. The project provides 9,767 square feet, which is a difference about 14,253 square feet, or 9%. An application for a density bonus agreement is required to be approved for any project containing the incentives concessions based on the findings presented on the screen. Effectively providing the required publicly accessible open space would reduce the total number of units that can be developed and or impact the drive aisle area, compromising the project's feasibility and safety for residences and emergency responders. Therefore, staff is recommending approval of the requested concession. And as far as the general plan, the proposed project aligns with several goals and policies, including the goals seen on the screen here. Goal LU1, which is for growing responsibly. Goal LU4 for complete communities. UD1 for physical character. And HE, which is on the next slide, for housing supply and diversity. So it also meets those policies identified on the screen as well. And here we have the I'm not sure what happened. And for the city's inclusionary housing requirements, the project exceeds the affordable housing goal for the ownership category of the city's what's referred to as the AHOCO, the Affordable Housing Opportunity and Creation Ordinance, as it's providing 5 on-site units designated for very low-income households earning 30 to 50%. The requirement for sale is 5% moderate level, and this is providing very low income. Currently, the Orange County area median income is currently set for a four-person household for very low income as $78,900. So the affordable units would consist of 2 3-bedroom and 2 3-bedroom units, ranging from 12,000 to 14,000 square feet in size, and will contain the kitchens, bedrooms, bathrooms, and the in-unit storage and the open common living areas. The developer's inclusionary housing plan has been reviewed and approved by the city's housing division. And the applicant was required to abide by the city's Sunshine Ordinance meeting. So the applicant held 2 community meetings in compliance with the city's Sunshine Ordinance. The first meeting was held on October 15, 2024. And the second meeting was held on September 4th, 2024. There was a few comments and questions that came up regarding this, but there was no real issues or concern raised for the development at either of those 2 meetings. And the materials for both those meetings can be found on the city's project website. And as far as CEQA and the CEQA guidelines, the proposed project is exempt from further environmental review under section 15168 for the program EAR. This exemption applies when a previously certified program EAR has adequately analyzed the environmental effects of an activity and no new significant impacts would result from the proposed project. A CEQA section 15168 consistency memo was prepared by the applicant's environmental consultant and peer reviewed by the city's own consultant. And the memo determined that the project does not introduce any new or more severe environmental effects beyond what was previously identified in the program EAR for the MIMU. And then based on the analysis, the project qualifies for the exemption under CEQA and no further environmental document or documentation is necessary. And then there's no fiscal impact associated with this action, but a fiscal impact and economic benefit analysis was prepared by the applicant. And the analysis indicates that the project is anticipated to result in an increase in the general fund revenues following build out of the project, which is estimated at approximately $340,716 per year. There would be an increase in the general fund expenses estimated at approximately $231,055 per year. Accordingly, there's expected to be an annual surplus of approximately $109,662 to the general fund following build out of the project. And then construction of the project would result in an increase in employment by 140.26 full-time equivalents, construction-related jobs, and an increase in labor income of approximately $12,250,665. And then lastly, the applicant is anticipated to pay approximately $2,189,502 in development impact fees to the city. With that, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution approving site plan review number 2025-01, adopt a resolution approving vesting tentative tract map number 2025-01, and adopt a resolution approving a concession and development standards as memorialized in Density Bonus Agreement 2025-01. Staff would like to note that we are recommending an additional condition of approval that was not included as part of the Planning Commission's agenda packet. And while not exact verbiage, the added condition of approval would provide planning staff discretion to work with the developer to redesign the storefront design for the duplexes to be more in line with the goals and objectives of the MIMU to create a true storefront design that truly activates First Street. Lastly, the applicant is in attendance today, so should there be any questions directed to the applicant, they can respond to those today. So thank you.
Thank you. Does the commission have any comments or questions for staff? Commissioner Pham.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Pedro. Since we're on the subject of the storefront, what caught my eye is that it's quite a bit set back from the right of way, which is great. But there's quite a lot of glazing in the portico area of these duplexes. Do we have restrictions in place for the future tenant to put up fencing if required, or is that not in line with kind of the commercial storefront look that we're aiming for?
Thank you, Commissioner. That's a good question. That would not be in line with what the intent of the MEMA would be, not in line with the fact that we have the publicly accessible open space and the fact that we're trying to activate First Street, which is kind of why the design is the way it looks now. So it would be highly discouraged. And moreover, I don't think that they would be able to do it just because of height restrictions that we have for fencing along PLs or that close to the property line.
And then the top site entry, it seems quite close to the site intersection of the adjacent site. Is that a concern?
Are you referring to the site plan?
Right.
Let's see. And you're referring to this one here or the site entry?
Top, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay. And proximity to building,
Proximity
13.
to the, yeah.
let's see. I do know that this is something that's been carefully reviewed by the city's development project, development review committee,
Right.
where we spent quite a bit of time going back and forth on the site design, and those agencies include Public Works. And so this matter of the location of the drive aisle is really important to them for safety. And so what I can say is that this has been carefully vetted, and it doesn't sound like it's been presented a challenge for accessibility to the unit or even visibility or even sort of site access to either pedestrian or vehicles.
Okay. Because I just kind of looked at overall site. I know there's a bus stop probably 10 feet or so past that site entrance. And then we have oncoming traffic that's coming that way. You know, the bus is loading pedestrians. I'm just kind of imagining there might be a little bit of a backup, but as long as traffic reviews it, that's not an issue for myself.
What I can say is that typically for the location of the driveways, utilities, bus shelters can't be within 10 feet of a driveway approach.
Mhm.
And so that has been carefully reviewed.
And then one last comment before I move it down. I know that other projects that came in front of us, there is a plan that kind of shows a tentative selection of where the affordable units would be. I know that it's not concrete. Do we have an inkling of which units those affordable units would be and where they are located on the site?
Short answer is we do. The city's housing division worked with the applicant to approve the inclusionary housing plan, which includes kind of the location of those affordable units. Where those are right now, I don't have an answer for you, but maybe if we can, I don't know if we have that information for you tonight, but we can certainly provide it to you. Just generally speaking, we ensure that the unit, it's equitably distributed throughout the entire site based on the number, or I guess the plan types that are proposed, to make sure that the 5 very low incomes are providing kind of the same sort of amenities as the rest of the units.
Okay. Yeah, the main reason I ask is I know that there needs to be accessible units given the 3 or more units, there needs to be an accessible unit. I would like to see, or I would suggest that one of those accessible units is allocated towards an affordable unit, just because given, you know.
So let's see, it looks like we have some information here. Looks like there'd be one unit located where the cursor is. Second unit located here. A third one here. Fourth would be down here. And the fifth would be in this corner. So there'd be,
Ideally, one of the 5 in my suggestion would be also an accessible unit.
I believe that's the case.
Right.
One of them
Okay.
has to be kind of accessible because you're right, the building code requirements for 3 or more require the ground floor accessibilities. And so in this case, that would have to be equitable as well.
Sounds good. Thank you. That's all from me, Chair.
Commissioner Scamilla.
All right, thank you, Chair. Yeah, okay. No, I think you answered that. That one, no. Okay, that's still a little bit better. Okay. Actually, so I get, you answered my question there. I was mostly concerned about the access whether or not the affordable units were going to be towards the front of the property, those mixed use designs that we're seeing, just because I guess I just want to make sure that people were able to apply and qualify. So I know it might be hard to get someone who's running a business and then maybe also qualifying at the same time. So that concern's taken care of. I do think, though, that there should be some forethought into how that publicly accessible open space is to be activated or allocated. So I don't necessarily think it's a bad idea to have anything that kind of works with that particular business, whether a coffee shop or some sort of outdoor seating or something to kind of activate it a little bit more. Because I think in this particular stretch of First Street, still have a ways to go when it comes to making sure that there's positive activity on the street. I guess we'll phrase it that way, just to make sure that we do have kind of constant activation. And I don't think that it's a detriment to the MIMU if we do work to think about what the individual unit owner can do in that space immediately in front of their property. I think that there should be some consideration there. It doesn't necessarily have to be written in stone as part of the development agreement, but at least some sort of process to begin with the property developer. And a lot of flexibility there. I just think that we should have some consideration on that. As far as the landscaping, I think it looked great. If there are any substitutes for California natives or pollinator-friendly landscaping, always encourage that. It's usually a pretty small fix. And then I was just wondering if we are going to maintain full open access for those fire escapes kind of towards the rear of the property, or if they're going to need to be is there going to be some sort of gated mechanism between the two? I tend to support or encourage, flexible access amongst neighbors. I think it creates more of a holistic urban environment, but I know that sometimes, these walls will kind of come up over in the future. So I don't know if we have any details. I guess it would be the southeast corner.
You're referring to the circulation throughout the site that.
Yeah, but just that southeast corner for the most, all the way in the back on the private drive. So is that going to be fenced or completely open? Because I know it's saying the fire easement and access is still there, but I'm not sure if that just means that there's going to be the little lock box or the Knox box. What's it called? Knox box. Yeah, right. Or if it's going to be accessible kind of from both sides. And if there was any explanation as to what that little walkway is, right immediately next to the property line back there. I couldn't really tell what it was from the site design. Sorry, from the site plan.
Let's see, I'm looking at our fencing plan, which is not included as part of a planning commission packet. But let's just confirm. And it looks like that's shown as existing fence and gate. So it looks like currently an existing fence at that location, which would be here, which I think is what you're referring to, correct?
Correct, yeah. So, okay, so just the gate will remain as is then, but still accessible for fire purposes.
Yeah, and you had, right, so if there's any sort of need for this, and if it's servicing any sort of public accessibility, there's building code requirements for accessible like push bars and stuff like that. But you had a second question regarding that area? Yeah,
so and then if you go immediately kind of where it curves over a little bit, there's just this walkway. I wasn't sure if it was a walkway that then leads to the from one side to the other. So there's a walkway there, and then also if you go further west. So I guess it would be further up on this map. It also then seems to have an access point, all the way on the top left corner. So I'm just wondering, is that a walkway that we're planning there? Again, it just looks like there's some additional access back there, and there was like a little small, maybe 3 foot wide path. So I don't know if it's a dog run or what it is. I'm just trying to get a better understanding of the site layout.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. I know there's a walkway that leads to a maintenance gate, which would be up here. So perhaps the accessibility is for the maintenance gate, just for access. I know the developer has had conversations with the adjacent properties and just in anticipation of development of the site. So perhaps I could speak to that matter a little bit more in detail regarding this one specifically. But let me just double check. Sorry, I'm pointing to this here.
And it might be one of the, because I know there's like a lot of random easements here, right? So we have like sewers and ditches and other old easements that were here. So I'm just trying to understand if that's what we're seeing or if it's just something completely different.
Yeah, I know that the wall and fence plan for this corner here specifically shows existing 5 foot perimeter fencing. So whether that fencing is accessible to adjacent sites or not, I don't have the answer to for you tonight. But again, maybe we can have a clarifying question for our applicant today.
Okay, perfect. And oh my gosh, and just for clarification, I guess this particular site is losing a little bit of their landscaping for future public right of way along First Street, but there are no plans for widening in this particular segment. It's just for a wider sidewalk at this point.
Looks like there's an easement for utility purposes, but I mean, beyond what's shown on the plan, I don't think there's anything in addition that we're asking for.
But just even on the First Street side, so there's a public right of way and future public right of way, but again, just no plans for expanding First Street, just to, I guess, make it consistent with the rest of this corridor.
Beyond kind of what's shown already on this plan.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. It's like that little bit of the kind of orange, well, I guess the magenta that is beyond the property line.
This here.
Yeah, and it's, I guess you see it more on, oh my gosh, and probably not the site plan. I can come back to it. There's one of the attachments that it kind of shows up a little bit more. I think it was on the actual tentative track map.
Yeah, I thought that was showing as I'm sorry, easement utility, easement for utility purposes. But we can clarify that as well.
Yeah, just because I think, one of the things we're being asked to do is to essentially less public open space. But I think that they're already losing open space by giving that over to the city. So it seems like a fair trade-off and relevant point that they are in fact meeting like standards, and they would be probably credited with more open space if they weren't having some taken away for the street.
Yeah, thank you. It looks like the plans show an 8-foot dedication for public utility. I'm sorry, easement for public utility dedicated to the city of Santa Ana. So it's 8 feet beyond that. So I'm not sure if the plan shows that's what that's showing, but at least on the map, it shows the 8-foot beyond the PL.
Okay, that's all I had.
Commissioner Benninger.
First of all, I appreciate my brand new seat. I'm not going first. I like that. First of all, I'm very excited about this plan, and in that area is fantastic. I'm glad to see something that's coming in that area. A couple questions that I do have, and one of you took out of my questions away from me, saying you are going to redesign the front so it looks more attractive. I appreciate that. The question that I have, if we do have a business up there, where are people going to park if they come to stop at that business, be it a coffee shop or whatever?
You're referring to the businesses that would kind of establish here. Should the market kind of establish, or?
Correct.
Yeah. That's a good question. I know that this development in general has 22 guest parking spaces, but that's not something that would kind of really be feasible for parking on site and walking over. I think the intent of the MIMU was to kind of develop this walkable, sort of multimodal sort of community.
Mm-hmm.
And the intent for that First Street is to be walkable, right? So it's supposed to be neighborhood serving. So if it's not this development, specifically residents walking over and kind of patronizing the units, it's adjacent residences as well in the area. But to have like high vehicle traffic stop and then park and then frequent this, I mean, it could happen, but that's not really the intent of the MIMU. It's to kind of activate just the immediate area along First Street, which is what is envisioned.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Because I know right now parking 2 cars per unit, and they're proposing 25 more parking spaces than what that figures out to be. So I assume that's 25 guest parking areas that they're going to have?
22 guest parking spaces for a parking rate of 2.25 per unit. You're right. So each townhouse would have 2 parking spaces, but that's really to kind of allow for guests for the residences, right? There's oftentimes parties, whatever, people have people over. So in order to reduce the parking impact to just this site and adjacent sites, they're providing above and beyond what's required.
Okay. I love the idea that they have first floor parking and garages. That's great. Where would those 22 spaces be?
On this site plan, they're located towards the south of the property. So there's a few here. Oops. So there's a few here where the cursor is at. There's a few on the reciprocal access area on the adjacent site to the east. And I think that makes up the 22 parking spaces that are proposed, because everything else is essentially utilized for drive aisle and access into the buildings. So these two areas here.
Gotcha. One of the things that's being committed to is watch over those parking areas, make sure cars aren't there for too long and things of that nature. But if all these units are up for sale, who's going to manage that once all the units are sold?
What the city and staff recommends in the conditions of approval is like a parking management plan. And when we do when we finalize the final map for recordation, the city reviews the CC&Rs for the homeowners association that gets created. And we ensure that that language gets built into the CC&Rs to ensure that garages are supposed to be used for parking of vehicles, not storage. That, for example, there's a tag program established for people who live there, or maybe a guest parking program where you have to register your guests online, or they give you like a pass. So it's built into the conditions of approval, which will make their way into the CC&Rs. And essentially the HOA, the homeowners association, would be the ones kind of like enforcing those, either through a management company, or it's most likely some sort of management company.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because right next to this is Metro East Senior Living. And unfortunately, that building's been sold a number of times. And of course, as you all know, we really had a problem with, that's why we formed the Zoo Neighborhood Association, in order to help those residents handle the problems that have been developed, because all their commitments that the Planning Commission agreed when that was built all kind of faded away on it. So I guess what you're telling me is this HOA will be looked to maintain the agreements that we do have as far as the parking, watching parking, and the upgrade of the project.
Through some variation of an HOA, because they're going to be implemented into the CC&Rs, whether it's having some sort of, I don't know, towing number or whatever for vehicles, signage on the site, kind of indicating clear parking rules, or constant reminders that people get as part of a living in a community like this. But because they're going to be in the CC&Rs, it's going to be the responsibility of the homeowner association to kind of enforce and implement. And our hope is that it's not going to be a parking situation just because of the parking rate that is being proposed, again, above and beyond what's required for the MIMU area. Most of these developments would come in asking for concessions for parking or to do a 0.5, and that's not the case in this one.
This one, I really don't have a problem with the reduced public area, because there is a problem in that area with crime. And a lot of work is being done by the police department right now to help clean it up. So I do have concerns about the security because we talk about fences and sound like there's not going to be much gating. Is that right? Did I hear you correct on that?
I'm sorry, Commissioner, could you repeat that question one more time?
I'm concerned about the security on this project, how they can secure the site so we don't end up having a number of problems with vagrants or homeless coming into this area.
I mean, there is perimeter security fencing proposed, just not throughout the entirety of the site, because we have to maintain this private drive open through the accessible reciprocal access agreement. The publicly accessible open space, for example, there's a condition on there that it be maintained open throughout the day, but that's not to say that it couldn't be closed off to ensure the safety of residences. I think that might actually have to be a clarifying question for applicant as well, but I think that might even be proposed now. Okay. Just because, again, the open space that's being provided, the accessible one anyways, is along the frontage, and it comes in between the two duplexes here. So accessibility onto the site theoretically could happen into this common open area, but there's kind of a clear design to maintain both areas kind of separate, while still maintaining the requirements of the MIMU essentially for the publicly accessible open space.
Gotcha. Okay. Also, there's a playing field that I think belongs to the school, but it's in Santa Ana. Will these residents have access to that playing field?
No, I don't think they would. I'm checking to see, you're talking about the playing field to the west, correct?
Correct.
Well, again, that might be a question for our applicant, because I know there's a fencing program proposed, and I know they've been in conversation with the school just for the requirements of rebuilding the fencing or including new fencing. There's a maintenance gate, but my gut says that there's not going to be any sort of access from those residences to the field, but we can clarify with our applicant.
Okay, because I can see children even attending that school would be grateful with the gate back there. They could walk to school on it. Okay. It wasn't clear to me, are these all 3 bedrooms or are there some 4-bedroom units?
No, there's some 4 bedrooms, I believe. Let's see. Yeah, there's 34 4-bedroom units proposed, 34 3-bedroom units, and then 12 2-bedroom units. And then the duplexes are all 3-bedroom units.
Okay. I think it's very, very good. Okay, that's all that I have for now. Thank you.
Vice Chair Ramos.
Thank you. Yes, I have a few questions. I'll start with a question on the landscape plan. So I apologize if this was already shared, but are the trees in the landscape plan all a part of the list of recommended trees that ETAC has created?
I can't answer that because I don't know the list of the ETAC recommendation, but as far as I am aware, it's not a requirement for them to be consistent with the ETAC list. But with these drought tolerant requirements, a lot of the species happen to be the same as what most people would propose, most developers would propose to meet the water efficiency requirements. They often are the same, but whether they're the same trees or they're on the list for ETAC, I can't answer that question. I don't know.
Okay, thank you. And then I have some questions on the affordable units that are being provided. So I think I heard it was 6 units. I don't know if this question would be best answered by you or by community development staff that's present today. Sorry, is it 5 or 6 units?
It's 5 units, very low income.
Okay, how was it decided that it would only be 5 units?
So the city's inclusionary housing requirements are for providing 5% moderate for sale projects. Beyond that is up to the developer to decide what they want to do. We have inclusionary housing requirements to say we have on-site, well, I guess options to satisfy the inclusionary housing requirements, either provide on-site or pay in lieu. In this case, the developer decided to propose on-site, but at a very low. So it's really just a developer decision to provide that amount of units. It isn't something that we're requiring because our requirement's 5% moderate.
Thank you. So I understand there's no requirement and they're meeting recommendations. Was there any conversation on interest to provide more or at different AMI levels?
Are you asking if staff requested more affordable units?
Not if staff requested, if staff or if the developer at any point expressed interest.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. So I also know that the units are being provided at very low, which is 30 to 50% AMI. The next level below that would be extremely low, which I believe is 15 to 30% AMI. Do you know if there was any interest from the developer to provide any of the 5 units at extremely low?
I'm not aware of that. That might just be a better question for the applicant.
Okay, and I think I'm gonna have to ask all of the questions of the applicant. Or I don't know if a community development staff has any insight into any of these before I ask the developer as well.
We can ask, but I'm not sure. Judson, Madonna, do you know if they provided anything else? Or
No, so
Hi, Commissioners. So the units that are being provided were the ones that were included in the inclusionary housing plan. This does exceed the requirement that we have for the inclusionary housing ordinance, since they are providing them at very low income. So we went ahead and did that. And they could go at a deeper affordability level if they chose to. However, that's a decision that they make for the density bonus. So if they go at a deeper affordability, then they would get more of a density bonus, but that's really up to the developer.
thank you. And then I also have a question on how the unit type for the affordable units was selected. So I know there was a slide that shared the specifics and the breakdown of those 5 units. I don't know if we can go back to that slide.
It wasn't on this presentation before you today, but it was presented by our housing team, and I kind of just went through and selected kind of approximately where they'd be located. There's 3 on this side of the development and 2 on this side of the development.
Oh, sorry, I think there was a slide that went into the unit size.
Oh, the unit size, I'm sorry.
So if I can speak to the calculation, so the developer did propose 5 units at a different distribution, but what we do is that we take the total units for each unit type, and that gets broken down by bedroom size and also by unit size. So for each unit type, we take a proportional 5% for those, and then we round it up. So the proportionality for all of the unit types was ended up being 1 2-bedroom unit, 2 3-bedroom units, and 2 4-bedroom units. So we just ensure that the units that are provided are proportional to everything that the market rate units are providing. And then once they propose the location of the actual units, we just check that they are not all in one building or all in one specific area of the building, to ensure that residents have equal access to all the amenities and to the different buildings.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And then I have I guess like an extension of that question. Was at any point the developer considering making one of the 6 units with the flex space available as an affordable unit?
That was not discussed, no.
Okay, so I'll re-ask all these questions to the developer. And I know we've had other projects come in the same area with very similar breakdowns. And these are questions I've asked. And I think in the past, after developers have heard them, there has been some interest. So thank you.
Should I stay?
Commissioner Wu.
So SB 330 says that they could make this 86 unit possible if they designate more for the low income, right? And some other.
No, not exactly, Commissioner.
means-
That's this density bonus agreement. The density bonus agreement that allows certain concessions for certain affordability types. So in this example, they're providing 5 very low incomes, and that gets them at a 6% affordability rate. That per the state law allows them 1 concession as a concession for development standards.
In other words, we could talk about applying more development standards and things, but we don't.
Sure.
Commissioner Wu, housing laws in the past couple of years have gotten very complicated and very rich in their diversity and how they affect local jurisdictions. What you have before you tonight is a project that was submitted pursuant to SB 330, which is an act that, among various other components, basically establishes that if a decision-making body were to consider a housing project and want to go down a path of denial, that there are incredibly high standards of facts and findings that a decision-making body would need to make in order to warrant denial of a project. Other components include like limiting the number of public hearings, because in some jurisdictions they would kill projects through paper cuts like that, just like endless public hearings. Other components say that if a general plan and a zoning code are not consistent, then the general plan densities for the housing prevail. But the salient points for you guys tonight in your role as decision makers for SB 330 is just that a path towards a denial of a project would require a very high threshold of findings to make. When it comes to not meeting the standards, on the other hand, that's mostly about state density bonus law. State density bonus law has been on the books for many, many decades at this point, since the 70s, I believe. And in its most recent form, basically says that if you provide on-site affordable units, that if there's any development standards that get in the way of actually physically producing those units, that developers can request waivers or concessions from them to make it more practical to build those units on site. And so in certain projects, when they can't meet all of our development standards, they'll request waivers or relief from those because the state legislature has decided that the trade-off is better to have affordable units than to have compliance with every single development standard.
Which makes this a very unique project to meet some unique goals that we want for the diversity of housing and accessibility to the community, and where it's located in a commercial zone. And we're not knocking down a neighborhood, we're knocking down a 5-story building. And so an office building. And in the public hearing, I suspect we have had no opposition to that, right? No negative findings, and we don't have any comments from the community, right?
When it comes time to the public hearing, our recording secretary will outline any comments that we received on the project. But just for the commission's full understanding, this area is zoned commercial, but the general plan does allow for mixed-use residential commercial developments. And this site has an overlay, which is like extra icing on a cake that says, oh, if you want to build mixed-use developments like residential, commercial, even hotels, then these are the standards that you follow. And that's all documented in the staff report. So the use of mixed-use residential is permissible here.
And we've been lately discussing a lot of zoning overlay, and we're going to have some discussion after this. And my curiosity is in terms of the legal part of ownership. Does staff really look into this to ensure that the ownership document, because when you're a proud owner, your children or other inheritors want to make sure they know what they're getting and they're able to get it, and they, that it becomes an asset. So, because it's 86 units, townhomes and condos and ownership, I guess there's a ownership overlay, right? And that they're going to be a homeowner association or something.
That's right. As our principal planner pointed out, one of the actions that's requested before you this evening is to not just approve this project, but allow its subdivision for individual ownership so that each unit could be owned separately as any other condominium community would be in California.
Yeah, I just want to get all that on the record that we've done all this, and so we don't have to keep questioning about it. Thank you. So the major factor is our decision to want me allows us to do what we're going to do when we approve it, right? Okay.
I like that this is a project that is for homeownership because I think we have seen a lot of projects that are rentals and things like that. So it's nice to see a project that has that subdivision enhancement on it. I understand the 5% moderate affordable housing component to this project, but I am a fan of even numbers, so I will make a friendly request to the developer to see if we could just add like one more very low income housing unit to this project. I did want clarification on the developmental impact fees and what does that imply? If you could share what those fees were and what that entails.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe maybe you were referring to this slide, the fiscal impact slide that talks about the benefit analysis. So the project, if it were to get approved tonight, would have to go to City Council for the density bonus agreement. But assuming that it moves forward, the developer still has to prepare construction documents to go through building plan check and get permits issued. As part of that overall process, there's impact fees that have to be paid related to parks and open space, related to public works, traffic fees. So this is kind of referring to collectively all the fees that would be required to be paid as part of this development once permits are issued.
And that makes sense. Okay, thank you so much. Do the commissioners have any additional questions for staff? Commissioner Pham?
It's not so much as a question, but more of just I would advise staff once if the project gets approved that there's a few points that I would like to kind of mention to make sure that the project serves the future residents of the project. I've seen a lot of similar projects to this where I've seen the owners retroactively needing to secure trash enclosures, utility closets, outdoor outlets. And I think that preemptively, if we can discuss that with the applicant early on, just to ensure a safe environment for the future residents, I think that would be something that's worth looking into. Other than that, I think it's just the parking that kind of just jumps out at me. I did a quick kind of Google review, and it seems like the projects surrounding this project seems like the residences are saying that those projects seems a bit underparked, that there are parking management issues associated with the surrounding projects. So I would encourage that. It seems like the parking on this project are quite exposed in terms of accessibility from other projects. So I think as a precaution, whether it's in the CCNR or property maintenance operation, that somehow I would encourage finding a way to secure those parking so there's no conflict, especially because there are higher density projects around it, that there's no conflict between the different residences from other projects parking at this project. And that's pretty much it.
Commissioner Escamilla.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. All right. This might be minor. So I know that we really can't do anything on design, but I guess just a couple of thoughts and recommendations before we're getting here. So I'm just wondering if we can do anything, and it's probably maybe even too late or maybe not, on just the green and texture of the stucco. So for anyone that follows me, they know that I am not a fan of thick green stucco. I think whenever we can have a smooth stucco finish, the building does look much nicer. It's easier to maintain over the long haul as far as not collecting grime, dirt, and this is next to a freeway, so it is going to collect that relatively quickly. So anything with smooth stucco finishes, it costs a little bit more, but I think it does end up looking a lot nicer as a product. So that's number one. Number two, I'm questioning the combination of the Latigo bricks with the Creamy Cove mortar. I know it's like a small thing, but we're basically doing a white on white. So if there is any alternative brick types, I'm looking at Tundra Brick. They have a lot of other options that are a little bit darker. So either the Ironside, the Hartford, the Ashland, if you still want to go gray. But I just think that combination of that type of brick face, so Latigo and the Creamy Cove mortar that's in between, again, creates this kind of white on white, like blank finish. So if you are able to have some color contrast there, I think it'll make the building look a little bit nicer, at least that one in the front. So that's number two. Let's see. Yeah, now I can't even read my own handwriting. That was like 2 minutes ago. Okay, let's skip number three. I'm wondering, as far as the structure on site, it's not a historic building by any stretch, but I would recommend that we have kind of an ongoing HABs light sort of scenario going on, right? So we don't want to do like a full historic analysis of the building and like documentation, but if we have anything where we can at least photograph the building from different angles, it's just a nice to have as far as like, hey, we're going to demolish this very large structure that was part of our city's history. Can we have some sort of documentation of that and then deposit it with the planning and send in a history room? I think that's worth taking a look at. And then to the overall point that we're hearing from the neighborhood and the community, I think this is around street parking or around parking in general, around creating a walkable environment. I really do think a lot of that really fundamentally comes down to roadway design. And this is an area where we might be kind of taking a deeper dive and consideration as to whether we consider First Street a street or a road. Do we want people to go very quickly from the 5 and 55 in order to access the rest of the city? Or is this an area that we are looking to go 2 lanes with angled parking, with additional landscaping so that people can kind of quickly access the area? Is this an area that we are considering for more of a street treatment rather than a roadway treatment? But that's a larger conversation than what we're looking at here. So with that, I think that's all I have until I can remember number 3 by the time the applicant comes up here.
Commissioner Benninger.
Thank you, and I appreciate my fellow commissioners and the questions that they ask. And to me, design looks great, and I'm glad to see the cement bricks tiles up on top, prevent fire from spreading if that does happen. The only question I do have, this is more for staff, as we go through the projects, do we review this with the fire department to make sure the fire hydrants are in the right spot and all the necessary good things are done that they approve to?
Yes, we do, Commissioner.
All right, I don't have any additional questions right now.
Vice Chair Ramos.
My questions are for the applicant. Thank you.
Commissioner Wu, any additional questions for staff? Okay. With that, the public hearing is now open. Would the applicant like to speak on the matter? Please approach the microphone.
Good evening. This on. Good evening. Oh, cool. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Louisa Fletto. I'm with Meritage Homes. I just want to say thank you to the city staff. It's been great working with them, really efficient, really helped move this project along and brought in some high quality, good comments that help make the project better. A little bit about Meritage Homes. We are the 5th largest public home builder in the U.S. We've been in business for 39 years. We've built almost 200,000 homes at this point. In Southern California specifically, we've been in this market since 2004. Across the U.S., we operate in 12 states and 25 markets. Our mission as a home builder is that we really try to target a first-time home buyer or a first-time move-up buyer. We really, in terms of price point and type of home, that is the market that we see the need for. So that's what this project is providing, that missing middle housing that we think is so needed here in Southern California. Additionally, we really pride ourselves on some of our energy efficiency features that we do. This community would be solar all electric. Additionally, we do some really nice features that help elevate the home, especially in an attached product type like this, where we do spray foam installation, we do conditioned attics, and different things that really help buffer, potential sound from adjacent units, as well as keeping, indoor air quality and AC features and conditioning your space a lot better. Our company participates in Avid Awards. It's a consumer kind of survey. For the home buyers, they put it out as a 1-month survey and then a 1-year survey. And the last 3 years, our division here in Southern California has actually won the award nationally for our quality and service. So a bit about the project. Thank you to Pedro for doing such a great presentation. Just a few things I want to touch on. We really made a point of working with the adjacent First Point apartments as well as the school St. Jean's, making sure that the edge conditions there with the existing uses were looked at and understood so that all of the users at the end would be would have their needs met. Additionally, we were able to kind of engage with the Zoo District Neighborhood Association, and we're really excited to bring this and kind of continue the revitalizing of this area, and we're excited to see that happen. As Pedro mentioned, we had 2 community meetings, all positive feedback, a lot of people eager and interested in these homes, which is what we want. A couple of the questions that I heard, and I can kind of touch on some of those things. So as it was mentioned, it's 5 affordable units, 1 2-bedroom, 2 3-bedrooms, 2 4-bedrooms spread throughout the site. We are doing it at the very low affordability rate. They are scattered throughout the project in different phases in different buildings, because we think that that's entirely important so that they're not singled out, anything like that, that they feel a part of this community. I believe there was a question about the driveway location and bus shelter. So the bus shelter in its existing location is getting relocated. So it's going to be a little bit more between the driveways, so there won't be a conflict. Additionally, that as the page is oriented, most driveway is going to be a right-in, right-out condition versus the shared driveway with First Point, I believe, has full movement at the moment. Part of our project will be putting in a constructed median, so that should also help kind of prevent any of that cutting across and potential traffic impacts. In the southeast corner, so there's an existing vehicular gate at First Point, which is going to be remaining in place. And then the question about that kind of gray area, that's actually a culvert. So there's a whole lot of stormwater that gets conveyed from the properties east to a catch basin that's in our southwest corner. And that ties into the storm drain channel that's on the west side of the school. So that is what that is conveying there. As mentioned, we have guest parking throughout the site. So we have the spaces at the rear. We have spaces kind of against the First Point building with the reciprocal access agreement that we have. And then we have a couple spaces right at the front, kind of more for those duplex units that have the flex space that could be a home office or business. These are not a true live work in that sense where they would be constructed where it might be like a cafe use. I just wanted to kind of make that clear. So that's a whole other construction type. And so we're not that. This is more that home office kind of white collar, you might say, uses that would go in those units. In terms of the open space of publicly accessible common open space on site, private common open space. We had a lot of conversations with staff about what this area wanted to be and how we wanted to see it activated while taking into consideration that there is some negative uses that we're trying to clean up in this area right now. So the publicly accessible common open space, we have some small seating areas. The planters all have seat walls around them and different features like that. And then at the distinction in the middle where it transitions on from the publicly accessible to the private, that kind of core open space area in the residential is actually going to have some fencing that limits it. So it will be used with, residents will probably have a fob or something like that for unlocking the gates, and it will be secure in that way. So that area with the different features, I believe we have seating, barbecue areas, some DG with like cornhole and different things like that, that will be secure and limited for residents only. In terms of the play field access, I know that was a comment. The school, so that's the school's fields, and they actually keep them private. They rent them out for different sports organizations and things like that. So the school has actually, that was one of the things we really wanted to be cognizant of is being adjacent to the school, being a good neighbor and understanding what their needs were. So part of that proposal is we're going to actually be for our shared property lines, removing the existing chain link fence and replacing with a block wall, an 8-foot block wall. That was their request. There will be a gate in that southwest corner because of some of the easements and restrictions. It'll be a vehicular gate that is locked, but that's for OC sanitation. There won't be any pedestrian access from our site to the school property, unfortunately. And then I think that those were the main points, but I know that there were some other questions up there that I might not have touched on. So I'm happy to answer any additional questions.
Thank you. Questions for the applicant, Commissioner Pham.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. I think I'll just echo what I was saying to Pedro. I think that securing a lot of these utilities and trash enclosures, I think is should be a priority, just because we want to limit dumping, especially if your residents are using those enclosures. Other residents see that they're easily accessible off the street, things like that. It might create conflict down the road. And then I think this is obviously based on your MPP engineers and photometric studies, but personally, I would encourage more lighting within the project,
Mhm.
just so that there's a sense of security. But obviously, that's going to be based on your photometric studies and kind of light compliance within the city, but just certain little notes.
Mhm.
And then lastly, what I would ask for is that I know that there's quite a few balconies that are
Mhm.
proposed within the project. I would propose, or I would ask that you consider a certain drip edge treatment along those balconies, just because you're proposing quite a bit of stucco. And what we see from similar developments over time is that everyone, even though they can't have a yard, that they love to have plants and certain things on their balconies, and that runoff of those potted plants eventually sustains the sides of your project. And to preemptive way of kind of stopping that would be just a simple drip edge or a gutter system, just to protect your investment as well as to protect the residents' investment. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Escamilla.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Number one, I guess I'll go with the first question on that was remaining was just the brick choice, because it's a cream on cream. So that's why I'm just thinking that there was any way to have a little bit more of a distinctive color difference there. I don't know if it impacts the project or if the architect's here on that. So that was just the one comment on the design. And then the question that I did have that I did now remembered was whether or not, if in the CCNRs, if the homeowners themselves will be able to change the colors of their own property, right? So I think it's one of those things where, at least in the city, we do pride ourselves on like having individual expression when it comes to one's own home. I think we find a lot of ways that people very dramatically can kind of color their homes, and it's just part of what we accept and like and kind of enjoy. So if there is any ability to allow some flexibility so that at least maybe some of the duplex owners, if both property owners agree, can change the color scheme over time, I think it just allows for flexibility of design in the future if people do want to do that to their own property. And I think that that's worth considering when we have kind of a for sale product. So just for your consideration as those documents are being written up.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Commissioner Benninger.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Excuse me. St. Jean's, is that a 1 to 8th grade?
Yes.
Okay. And they didn't see a value allowing children to walk because you're going to have children in this complex.
So actually the driveway that's just west of us, that driveway is actually the back entrance to the school. So that actually snakes along the recreation field and comes around to the school. So they actually utilize that as a secondary drop off.
Okay. So it does give children safe walk access from this complex to the school?
It would.
Good. Just out of curiosity, and this didn't affect my decision, wondering how far away is the nearest park to this complex?
That, in terms of the city's public park, I actually do not know that offhand.
I don't know either, but it's that. It's
technically the zoo, which is, I don't know, do the quick measurement real quick.
It's not our choice, but I would like to know.
It's 1,500 feet to the west down First Street if one were walking. That's to the edge of the zoo, but then of course one would have to walk down Zoo Lane to get to the primary entrance.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Cabrillo Park is also across the street from First Street, I believe to the north. I don't know my north, south, east, or west.
That's correct. Off of Fruit and Cabrillo Park Drive is Cabrillo Park. That would be outside of this zoo, the second closest park.
Just a comment. I do like your location. I can see the access to a lot of the office buildings that are in that area. I think it's ideal location. One thing I would just comment on it. We've had 2 buildings that we voted on here. The first one, when they took it down, the dust was so thick you could cut it with a knife. And the second one, they did such a beautiful job. So I will ask you again, please, with the contractor, ask them to make sure the cement's watered down and that they keep the dust down. in that area when they take it down, the bill overlay down.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Vice Chair Ramos.
Yes, thank you. Well, first off, thank you for the presentation, all of the information, and also thank you for complying with the city's efforts to provide affordable housing. It's really necessary, and it's great that it's going to be a part of a new development and that residents will have the option to buy at an affordable price. So thank you. And then I also have questions on just how you all decided how many units and what type of units. So was there any interest or effort to provide additional affordable units?
So as staff has kind of alluded to, when we went through the inclusionary housing plan, originally we were looking at, okay, provide the 4 on site and do in lieu for the remaining unit because it's a fractional unit. And then when we hit the point of wanting to have the ability to utilize a waiver or concession, it was, no, let's provide the 5 on site, even though that, puts us at a 6% rate now. Beyond that, no, there was never any conversations around a higher affordability rate. A lot of times we look at the balance of, do we want to do, moderate, or do we typically, right, we're looking at moderate, low, or very low. I know that the new plans for the next round of RHNA are introducing the 2 lower levels as well. When we were looking at this one, obviously the very low was the bottom end. And so that's kind of where it was a numbers game of what makes the most sense for what we can provide here. And so that's how we ended up on the very low.
Okay. Is there any interest in making any of those 5 units available at extremely low?
I don't think we've run any kind of sensitivity around that. I don't know. Did you say it's 15 to
30?
We would need to have conversations with staff about that. I wouldn't say we're opposed to it, but I think we need to understand what that does on our end.
Okay, thank you. And I understand that you aren't able to commit to that. You have to run the numbers, but I appreciate hearing that you would be open to a conversation with staff to explore whether or not it's feasible. And then a similar comment, were there any thoughts or consideration on making one of the 6 units with flex space an affordable unit?
Sure. So I think when we were having the conversations with staff around what units it would be, as Erlanda mentioned, we were actually initially, proposing only 2 and 3 bedrooms, and they came back and said, hey, we see a really strong need for the larger units. So we were really happy to be able to bring that to the table. In terms of the 6 units that have the flex space, with those being the largest square footage and fewest units, it really did not make sense to offer one of those, just given the price point threshold of what we would want it to be versus what it could offer. It didn't make sense to include those in the mix.
Thank you. Thank you for the answers and responses, and you sound very thoughtful in providing them. So I ask all of these questions because in Santana, we have a great need for units that are at the deepest affordability possible. And like community development staff shared, also units that are larger.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm also happy to hear that you're providing 4-bedroom units and that some of those will be affordable. And if there are any additional conversations with staff, I would consider you to explore what it might look like to explore providing one of the units with the flex space as an affordable unit, even if it was at a higher AMI, like moderate. I know you're providing all 5 at very low, which I think is great, but I'm just curious to see what it might look like if you play with how they're distributed, if you're able to provide maybe 3 at very low, 1 at extremely low, and if you could do a flex space providing that at moderate, just to also help, but obviously not requiring that you do any of that. Just, I see that you're open to considering how you can better serve our community. So we'll just throw out that consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Wu.
The 1,215 feet and the 2,488, it's a pretty generous size. I mean, some of the homes in my neighborhood is just about that size. So I think your accommodation there. You also have doggy poo-poo areas too. And you thought of that so that it allows pets, and I'm glad you did that. I'm kind of afraid that if we do all these tweaking that we're asking, you might have cost overrun because right now, building supplies and things are kind of in flux now as we don't know how, you know, I don't know if you already got all your supplies and things. Do you have enough of a healthy cushion so that you could maintain the affordability plans that you already have for low and moderate?
Yeah, so right now, as the project's designed and shown, we will be able to construct it. We need to run kind of the sensitivities on our end to see if adjusting any of the affordability or incorporating additional units is feasible. It's not off the table, but luckily, you know, we have a long history of construction. We have great trade partners. So even though there could be some potential supply chain issues, we anticipate that demo of the building would, you know, be starting at the end of, towards the end of this year, and with true construction starting in 2026. So hopefully, you know, that gives us a little time for
And
things.
you have a site to take demolish it.
Yeah, our demo proposals include the recycling and disposal of the building waste and, you know, the trees and existing parking lot features and different things that would be cleared.
Yeah, I'm just kind of concerned as I price out, you know, things like the vent over the stove, you know, appliances and things. They're not all made in this country, and you know, it's kind of flux now. The fans that goes in your bathroom, the electrical lighting and all that. Although we may have American names on it like Kohler, they're made in other parts of the world. So I'm very concerned that we don't ask and demand a lot more. You know, I think staff did a good job of putting it all together. We made all the concession up to the property line so that you could do it. You have two and how many spaces per unit for two-car garage, right? That's 22 surface guest spaces. So you thought about that all. You know, we could ask you to paint the whole damn thing pink, you know, and wouldn't make much of a difference, you know. So let's just get this thing done.
Thank you.
I do appreciate you having the conversation with staff about the affordable housing units and coming to us with 2 4-bedroom units, because we've had developers in the past be like, we're bringing affordable housing units, and it's like, yeah, but it's 2 studios, and it's like, oh, thank you so much. You're very considerate. Thank you so much. So I do appreciate that. I did want to ask if there would be any wiggle room for an additional unit. I do understand that we're at the 5% required, the legal requirement that we need to reach, but if there was any wiggle room, we'd greatly appreciate it. And I did appreciate Vice Chair Ramos' idea of, even if it were to be a low income or a moderate unit, that would be ideal. But granted, I know that we are voting on something tonight. So even if it were just an idea that would come back later, I just wanted to throw that out there. But I don't have any additional questions for you, so you're more than welcome to take a seat.
Thank you.
Recording Secretary, have we received any written communication, or is there a member of the public that would like to comment on this item?
Chair, we have received a total of 1 email in the form of public comment for this item before the 3:30 deadline, which has been distributed to the commission and posted online. Additionally, we have some copies for the public right in front if anybody wishes to read them. We also received a public comment after the deadline that will be made part of the record. If you're calling in, if you are attending this meeting in person and would like to comment on this item, please fill out a request to speak form and turn it into the secretary. If you are participating via Zoom and would like to comment on this item, Please select the hand icon to let us know that you would like to speak. If you're calling in and would like to comment on this item, please dial 9 and then 6 to unmute yourself. I will wait for a few seconds. Chair, we do not have any additional speakers.
Thank you. With that, we close the public hearing. I bring back the conversation to the commission. Is there a motion to approve this matter?
I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to move that we adopt a resolution approving the site plan review number 2025-01 as condition. Adopt a resolution approving vesting tentative tract map 2025-01 county map number 19337 as condition, and adopt a resolution approving a concession and development standard as memorialized in the density bonus agreement number 2025-01 as conditioned.
I have a motion by Commissioner Wu. Is there a second?
If I can just interject before the second, we can request that the condition that Pedro read into the record also be added to the motion.
Right, that's why I said as conditioned.
Thank you.
Right.
I'll second that.
I have a question for staff before we take a vote. So, sorry. Thank you. So staff, we heard that the applicant would be open to exploring whether or not they can provide or change their unit affordability a bit. If there was a motion that asked for this item to be continued, would that still be in compliance with state law? I know there was a limit to the number of public hearings that can happen.
Here's what I would suggest to the commission. Vice Chair Ramos, you brought up a similar request for another project not too far away, not too long ago, that they request exploring making one of the live work units, one of the affordable units. And so for that one, then what resulted was a financial impact analysis of that request that was evaluated by Planning and Building and the Housing Division before that final unit mix was finalized before permits. So that's certainly an option for you this evening if the commission wants to entertain that avenue. And that way it also saves the applicant the time and expense of returning to the commission for another decision on the matter.
Thank you. Yes, I remember that. And I would be interested in something similar. So I'd like to ask Commissioner Wu if you would be open to a friendly amendment.
As I understand it, if they could find a way to add some more additional unit, they will. If the economic is feasible, right? Not that they have to.
Yeah, we can't force them to, but can you just restate what that process would be, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So Commissioner Wu, if you accept Vice Chair Ramos's friendly amendment, what would happen is that would become a condition of approval. And then after tonight's hearing, basically the applicant would submit a financial analysis to the city, to Planning and Building and the Housing Division, documenting what this various menu of options would look like, whether it's like one of the flex units or whether it's including a sixth unit or whether it's a moderate income unit and the rest being very low income. So they would submit that to us and we would basically review it. And if it says that it is possible, then great. You know, we would want to make sure that that gets incorporated into the final project. And if not, then we would want to make sure that we concur with their findings using our expertise from both housing and planning and building before we sort of settle that decision.
Right. The additional unit, there are different ways to do it, right? You could add another unit by reducing the size of the other thing, which would drastically change the generosity of spaces, so you're not crammed into little cages, right? You actually have a home. If it means finding more room somewhere else to add another unit, that's the dynamic that I'm worried about, but it certainly is something that if it does not affect losing a generous proportion of building, that's something that will come out in analysis. It does not mean that they have to do it right. They just look into it. Okay. I'm all for that. You know, if we get more unit, I'm not against that. I just know that on the practical side of building, you know, yeah, what else do I got to do to get this thing passed, you know?
Sorry, Commissioner Wu, for clarification, were you accepting the friendly amendment?
Yeah, in a roundabout way.
Thank you.
So since he accepted the friendly amendment and I already had a second from Commissioner Benninger, do I need another second from Commissioner Benninger, just for clarification?
You could just for total clarity.
Can I make this second with my friendly amendment?
Yes, I'll accept the friendly adjustment, yes.
So I have a motion with a friendly amendment from Commissioner Wu and a second from Commissioner Benninger. Secretary, please call for a roll call vote.
And Chair, sorry, really quickly, we can also, for clarity, ask the applicants if they accept that friendly amendment from the Vice Chair.
Oh, correct. Perfect, thank you.
They stated yes for the record.
Stated yes for the record. Secretary, please call for a roll call vote.
Commissioner Benninger,
Aye.
Commissioner Escamilla,
Aye.
Commissioner Leo, Commissioner Pham,
Aye.
Commissioner Wu, Vice Chair
Aye.
Ramos,
Aye.
Chair Oliva.
Aye.
Motion approved by majority vote with Commissioner Leo absent.
That concludes the public hearing. Moving on to the work study session. Senior Planner Siri Champion will now provide a brief presentation.
Our housing division has been so busy.
Thanks to you all. So I'd like to give a brief reintroduction to Siri Champion. She's our senior planner in the advanced planning section of our planning division. That is, she is focusing entirely on the zoning code update. It's that monumental of an endeavor. And I do want to just preface that this effort is more than just updating a code book that gets shelved. This is a code book that's used on the daily by dozens and dozens of applicants that come to our counter, whether they're for small projects like building a room addition to their house, or a large project like the ones that have made headlines for the city, like Rafferty, Related Bristol, all that. As you go through our work study session tonight, you know, wear multiple hats. Some of it is practicality for applicants. Some of it is processes and streamlining. But above all, remember that one of the priorities for the city council and the city manager's office is economic development and the city's fiscal health. And that really trickles down to so much, right? We hear about things like, what if we redid the stadium? That's just one way of financial revenue generation. But another way that's less thought of, but that you're a part of, is the zoning code, because it is the first step in the development projects that generate not just permit and application revenues, but the increases in property tax valuations for our city. So it is part of that overall approach, and I hope that you wear those hats tonight as you hear the presentation and give your feedback.
Thank you, Director, and thank you, Chair Oliva. I'm excited tonight to present on the zoning code update because we've been working diligently, and since our last presentation, we've really taken a deep dive, and I'm ready to share some of that deep dive with you. Before getting into the presentation and tonight's discussion, I wanted to just ground tonight's study session in a philosophy that we've been using for this project, which is that good codes make good communities, and places where investment results in jobs, homes, businesses, and of course, amenities for all of our community members. The objectives for tonight's study session include providing an overview of the comprehensive zoning code update, sharing stakeholder input and responses, reviewing proposed new zoning districts, and presenting ideas for new processes. As a friendly reminder, the reasons for updating the code are several. First, we intend to modernize to reflect contemporary uses, standards, and processes. We'd like to make the code easier to use by incorporating graphics, tables, and simple language. as well as entire reorganization of the code from beginning to end, so that the way that it's organized reflects the way that developers and business owners use the code. We'd like to create greater transparency and predictability. We'd like to promote investment by new and existing businesses. We'd like to simplify and streamline processes and reduce potential for adverse land use impacts. And finally, incorporating new state laws. In terms of the benefits of modernization, Ali mentioned the city's overall approach to economic development, and this is one component of that overall approach. Secondly, the benefit of modernization includes promoting and facilitating new and expanded business activity for businesses of all sizes. Next, creating new, cleaner jobs which provide community members with opportunities for upward mobility. Enhancing the quality of development to create an environment where businesses and residents would like to locate. Intensifying in target areas to facilitate new development while preserving existing neighborhood character. And creating a user-friendly code and process which is easy to use, leading to proactive application submittals rather than having to initiate code enforcement activities on those who choose to not obtain permits. Also, we'd like to talk about the benefits of streamlining. It offers many benefits that align with the city's goals, including making the process easier and quicker, facilitating economic development and creating more certainty for developers, businesses, and property owners, sustaining our high levels of housing production, reducing costs, increasing the efficiency with which we use city resources, and continuing to achieve consistency with state law. In terms of the project timeline, we began this process in the fall of 2023 and started our engagement in the winter and spring of 2024. In a later slide, I'll go through what engagement we've done to date. But now in the middle of the screen in orange, you can see that we're working on production of the draft zoning code update. We're looking forward to a second round of community workshops in the spring of 2025. We're here tonight for the planning study session, and we'll be preparing for a study session with the City Council. Then looking ahead to the end of summer, beginning of fall, we'll host the third round of community workshops with the target of having public hearings to consider the zoning code update in the fall. In terms of engagement and response, the engagement started with stakeholder interviews. We conducted 74. Those included interviews with you as the Planning Commission, City Council members, developers, design professionals, community members, and so forth. Then we continued on to the community collaborative training, which was a time for the city to engage with CBOs to end with community members to then extend the reach of our advertising for the community workshops. We held 6 community workshops distributed throughout the city. We held 2 business workshops, and then finally we had a virtual workshop that reflected the in-person workshops that was available until March 20th. The business and development community was engaged through the stakeholder interviews as well as through those business workshops. And community members were engaged through the Community Planning Collaborative. The Community Planning Collaborative was a partnership with the Orange County Environmental Justice, Thrive Santa Ana, Green MPNA, and the Kennedy Commission alongside the city. On the right there, you can see a photo from that Community Planning Collaborative training. We heard a lot of positive feedback in response to that, and we saw many people come to the community workshops because of the outreach that was done by community members at this Community Planning Collaborative. So next, we'd like to go into what we've heard through these outreach efforts and to identify key topics as well as the responses that we're contemplating for the zoning code update. So first of all, what we heard included concerns about parking, where some people wanted more, whereas other interests wanted to see less required parking. We heard about a variety of characteristics of development. We heard business and development concerns. We heard a discussion about industrial uses, as well as a variety of other topics that we'll go into tonight. So starting with parking, The concerns that we heard included addressing parking impacts in existing residential neighborhoods. We heard about addressing parking constraints for new multifamily residential projects, where parking can sometimes be a concern that makes it difficult to produce housing, particularly when it comes to affordable housing. Finally, we heard about addressing parking needs for multi-tenant centers, where parking requirements can be difficult for new tenants to meet, and so that can discourage new businesses. In terms of emerging responses, we heard we've been discussing ways that we can modernize standards for on-site parking in single-family residential neighborhoods. It's difficult to address existing conditions in the zoning code, but we do have some options for consideration. Next, we're looking at reducing parking requirements for multifamily residential to reflect current best practices. For sites near high-quality transit stops, the city must follow state regulations that disallow jurisdictions from requiring parking in most circumstances. Next, we're drafting an easier process for permitting shared parking, where residential areas are adjacent to churches and businesses and other uses that occur primarily during the daytime. Lastly, for current parking requirements for multi-tenant centers, they can make it difficult to re-tenant existing units. And by establishing a consistent standard for all multi-tenant centers, we can facilitate new business development and expansion. So throughout the presentation, after we go over individual topics, I wanted to pause just in case there are any clarifying questions on that specific topic. We've got time allotted at the end for our discussion purposes. So we want to keep these questions to a minimum, but I just want to make sure that before we move forward, you're all clear on the topics that we've described. Yes. Okay, we'll keep moving then.
Can we ask a question now?
Yes, if you have a clarifying question.
Yes. Have you considered in your zoning unstable economy downturns in terms of the economic earnings of people being affected by policy at another level? What would we have a scenario? What caught my eye was your thought about jobs, but not only jobs, but jobs that advances you forward to higher income, which is great. But I would take it that you're looking at a scenario of normalcy 4 years prior to now, but we have a lot of uncertainty facing as I talk to World Trade Organizations and other types of economic groups. And I'm wondering if we've taken that into our consideration as well, because we have the most vulnerable population that's going to be affected by some of these policies.
I think that's a really important point, and I look forward to talking about that a little bit more when we get to discussions. Our goal, in order to kind of break down the presentation, is to take questions on the specific topics, and then at the conclusion of the presentation, we'll get into these broader discussion points.
Yeah,
so right now, I'm
area
looking
on
for
the economic development portion. Yeah.
Yes, we'll wait till later when we get there. Are there any questions on the parking concerns?
Thank you, Ceres. Yes, there's been a 2-year study going on that we haven't heard conclusions yet out of Public Works for parking. Are you privy to what they're finding in their survey, in their study?
We're tracking their discussions. They're primarily looking at parking in the public sphere. And so, of course, we need to plan for the complementary on-site parking. We are tracking what they're saying about permitted parking and the different ways that they can be addressing parking in existing neighborhoods, which is a key topic that's been coming up from the community members. But through the zoning code, we need to focus on what we can do for on-site parking. Okay, then let's move on to characteristics of development. So high quality development is an important value in the city. Some characteristics of quality development raised by stakeholders include increased variety of uses within mixed use development, green spaces, open spaces, trees, and landscaping, promoting opportunities for the reuse of office spaces, and supporting larger multi-bedroom housing options, which goes along with the discussion we just had on the prior item. In terms of emerging responses, we've got a few that we're contemplating and proposing. First, we can increase the variety of uses within mixed-use development by requiring a percentage of non-residential uses that aligns with market conditions and not asking for too much or too little, but those that align with market conditions. And also, we can increase the range of permitted uses that are allowed in those types of projects. By building flexibility in the adaptive reuse provisions, we can promote reuse of office spaces as well as reuse of other types of buildings. The housing element and community members value diverse housing options, including those for larger families. Accordingly, we can provide incentives for multi-bedroom housing options through flexibility in development standards. Lastly, while developers ask for less stringent open space requirements, community members would like to see more parks through the zoning. However, through the zoning code, we can only provide requirements for privately provided spaces and not for public spaces. Through the zoning code, we can adjust landscape requirements to provide for adequate green space. Are there any questions about these different characteristics of development? Yes.
I think my question is, it ties in with the parking and the green space.
Okay.
I think we should encourage more true mixed use where there is a residential, a commercial component underneath it, not just with the flex, residential units with the flex or the office flex space, just because just because it's commercial use, there's more parking requirement tied to it that can be used later on during the day for the residents. So there's this abundance of parking stock. And then my general question is, since all these projects require public open space, do we typically calculate that into our park space requirements, like in terms of total numbers? Because we're severely lacking every time we try to calculate our park open space.
Are you saying when we calculate the ratio of park space to our population, do we calculate the space that's provided on private property? No, I don't believe we do.
I think we should. That's my opinion. If we're talking about zoning, just because we're asking for it and we're designating it as public open space, because obviously we don't have any more room to put a park, but we are asking for public amenities. So that I think that helps the numbers a bit. And obviously, we want more parks. And then in terms of zoning, there's a lot of empty lots within the city that can be developed. Do we zone for parking structures? Like if it's like a publicly owned, or if it's a lot that's identified as vacant for quite a bit of time, would it be like a revenue generating asset if the city were to acquire that lot, produce a parking structure that alleviates parking from the neighboring residential areas? So providing a utility to the residents, but also generating revenue for the city, even though it could be commercial land or residential land, but it's just vacant. No one's attempting to develop it.
So we can allow parking structures as a permitted use to enable that.
Do we actively encourage applicant to, or certain developers who are looking to develop parking structures?
The Economic Development Division would be involved with that type of promotion of activity. The Planning Division doesn't get involved with making recommendations for how people would use their property.
Commissioners, you're doing great so far. Series at slide 20 out of 48. I just want to clarify on the clarifying questions. This is meant more for like, hey, when you say parking, do you mean this or this? But great points. But the end of the presentation will be the more sort of like, okay, now let's hear from you, just to help her keep going through her presentation.
Thanks, Alan.
Yeah, sorry.
So the next topic has to do with being business and developer friendly and addressing their, there was a clarifying question.
This is procedural, more or less at this point. Do we have sandwiches available tonight? I'm just like trying to keep my head open or my mind here in this moment. So I'm just asking that as a clarifying question for, do we have sandwiches after all this, or do we have any that are already here?
There are danishes and chips and punch, but no sandwiches tonight.
I would like to request a 5-minute break, Chair, if that's okay. Yeah, I just need a Danish at this point.
Let's do a 5-minute break just to get a quick snack and then we can return if that's okay, Siri. I know we're trying to get through the additional 28 slides, but let's return at 7:35. Okay, the meeting is back in session. Thank you so much, Siri. Back to you.
Thank you so much. I hope everyone's feeling well and refreshed after that little break. So now we can think deeply about these topics. So the next topic is being business and developer friendly and addressing the concerns of the business and development communities, who look to the city to promote investment. And we're considering a variety of means, such as streamlining by empowering our planners to make decisions, carefully considering the impacts of existing development when we make changes to the zoning code, creating more flexibility for tenant mix in commercial to make it easier to find tenants, and making adjustments to sign standards, which are key to visibility for store fronts and buildings. And also helping to create vibrant commercial corridors. And lastly, maximizing usable area for developers by changing landscape requirements and setbacks. The project team is looking at several different ways to respond by creating a new permit type under the director's authority, which we will discuss in detail in the next part of the presentation. We can also modify the nonconformities article to enable improvements to existing development. The team is also looking at allowing some commercial uses by right and generalizing the types of permitted uses in commercial to encompass more use types. So right now we're overly specific, which can be difficult then to align your particular business type into that commercial category. Next, we're looking at new sign standards, such as height, which will help to make signs more visible. And then consistent with the general plan, new zoning districts are proposed for mixed-use development, which will contribute to the realization of vibrant commercial corridors. Lastly, we're considering ways of liberalizing landscape and setback requirements to allow investors to maximize their usable area. Are there any clarifying questions about those things that I've just mentioned? Okay, let's move into industrial uses. So industry, we know, is an important topic because it's key to the creation of jobs, particularly clean jobs, which are important to the future of our economy, and also important to our residents who are looking for jobs and opportunities for mobility. Industry is also an important topic because of the potential for incompatibilities between uses. We heard from stakeholders about the importance of regulating uses that pose risks, buffering homes and schools, encouraging clean industries, and creating protected spaces for business owners to open new or continue and expand existing industry. In response, the team is proposing to modernize land use regulations for manufacturing zones, creating a business park zone to apply in areas where residential and industrial land uses interface. We'll talk a little bit more about that business park zone in a little bit. We're proposing to update the list of permitted uses and to maintain industrial zoning for properties identified as industrial in the general plan. In addition, the team is drafting standards, including development standards to minimize direct exposure, site design standards for physical improvements, and regulations for industrial operations. Are there any questions that are necessary to clarify what we're talking about with regard to industrial uses? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. The other category is quite broad. There's a lot of interest in many different things. In terms of round one community engagement, we heard about many other aspects of contemporary development and neighborhoods, including comments about high quality, higher density projects, providing for diverse housing types, allowing commercial uses in the industrial flex designated areas, ensuring net positive community impacts, creating transitions between new development and existing development so that we may preserve and enhance our residential neighborhoods, and implementing sustainability principles. Emerging responses to these other topics include drafting amenity requirements for higher density projects, allowing diverse housing types within residential districts, updating the list of uses allowed in commercial to allow commercial in industrial flex designated areas, examining best practices for a community benefits program, incorporating standards to transition between new taller buildings and existing shorter buildings, and incorporating sustainability principles into site design and development standards. Are there any other clarifying questions about these other topics?
Are these things going to be privately motivated, or will we have to restructure tax, have tax assistant kind of a vehicle to get investment going in the area? I think it's a great idea, zoning it so that there's some ways for developers to look at idea opportunity. Santa Ana is doing this and they're doing this, so why don't I jump on it? But then as soon as you do, you look at, well, how will I get some subsidy out of it? So are we incorporating that in that's Mike's department, right? In economic development?
Yes, so in terms of economic development, we have that arm as one of the many components or components of that systemic approach to economic development that we talked about at the beginning. And through the zoning code, we will look to enable and to promote and incentivize those different development types that will be good for the community. And the zoning code becomes then a tool that economic development can also be using.
So if I was a developer with $100 million, okay, I might not be having the kind of property that have lakes and waterfalls and all that, but I have to look at, this might be a more futuristic kind of solar, zero carbon base going up kind of building, about the open spaces incorporated in the design. So will our zoning allow for that kind of creativity, using new materials, more steel structures, and going up higher with roads going up to the top floor?
I would say that creativity is one of the things that we'd like to encourage through the zoning code. We want to make sure that we're being flexible. We're giving many different options so that developers are free to waive the one that they want to create great projects. The next topic in the presentation is the proposed.
One more clarifying question. I'm just wondering which sections of the code are we looking at? Are we strictly restricted to the Chapter 41, or some of the more general areas that touch on land use and planning? So I think there's certain prohibited uses, tattoos and hookah, were the ones that are coming to mind, at least on the quick search, that we probably should also kind of talk about as far as allowing different uses maybe, but I'm not sure if we're also kind of more generally talking about other sections of the code or just Section 41.
So the focus is on Chapter 41, but certainly there are references to other chapters of the municipal code. And so we'll have to be doing some cleanup activities in those other ones as well. But if you have a specific thing in mind, I'd love to receive that comment now or in writing later on. Great. So the next topic, as I was starting to say, was proposed new zoning districts. So when the general plan was adopted in 2022, some land use designations remained the same, but new land use designations were added. In the coming slides, we will review how those changes are proposed and how they'll be reflected in the new code. So this is the land use designation or the land use plan from the general plan, and it shows those designations as they're distributed throughout the city. In the legend on the left, you can see a series of colors that correspond to the different land use designations, as well as checkboxes or circles. So the checkboxes represent designations with corresponding districts on the existing zoning map. And the circles represent land use designations which have newly proposed districts. And we'll dive into those more directly. In the residential category, we have CR 30, which is called corridor residential. And then in the industrial areas, we have flex industrial, urban, and then for the mixed use categories, we have urban neighborhood, and at the very bottom, the district center. So let's look at those more carefully. The the corridor residential designation is intended for areas that are suitable for medium high density housing, such as townhomes and apartments. And we've designated areas along corridors within the focus areas or adjacent to areas designated as general commercial urban neighborhood or district center. For urban neighborhood, these designations are envisioned to promote development of semi-urban villages, accessible to community facilities, shopping centers, multiple modes of transportation. They will have vibrant pedestrian-friendly streetscapes and be designed for community interaction. The designations range in intensity and height as appropriate in different areas of the city. Next, the district center designation is envisioned to provide for urban scale retail, residential, and jobs-rich areas that are also connected to public transportation. And like the urban neighborhood designations, there are varying intensities and height ranges that are suitable in their different development contexts. The industrial flex designations are intended to provide areas for development of industry and cleaner, more modern uses. Adjacent to residential neighborhoods, the designation can serve as a buffer between homes and traditional industrial uses. And then adjacent to urban scale mixed use development, investment may emphasize significant employment opportunities for new and existing businesses. The business park does not have a direct correspondence to a singular designation within the land use plan. The business park is under consideration for or being proposed for a portion of the industrial area. This is in response to input received from stakeholders. We would be distributing the business park in areas designated as industrial, specifically between the M1 and M2 and residential neighborhoods. While the team is drafting the list of permitted uses at this time, we're considering office-related activities, research and development, limited retail or service uses, and potentially some training, educational uses to promote career development. Do you have any questions, clarifying questions about these different new zoning districts?
Would light industry be considered part of a business park?
Light industrial would continue to be M1. So business park would be this lighter buffering use between the M1 zones and the residential zones.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bettinger, think of it as a light industrial zone, something that you see in a lot of like the corporate areas around the airport and stuff, where you have these business parks where there's some very, very, very light, but mostly just like office tech type uses.
I have a question regarding the urban neighborhood as it's laid out on the map along what would be Bristol up until Warner. We just approved the Bristol-related project, and if we were to do something like that along Bristol up until Warner, I don't know how a traffic report would. I don't think a traffic report would come up good for us at any point if we were to do something like this in this area. Only because as someone who commutes this area frequently, whether it's going to the 405 or getting to the 5, it typically takes me longer to commute on Bristol than the actual drive on the freeway, wherever it is that I'm going. So maximizing this area here, that doesn't make too much sense to me. I would like to know like the thought process. I'm sure there's studies, I'm sure it's there, but just seeing it right here, how it is laid out and seeing like 4-story buildings, it's not, I can't connect the dots. And then knowing that there's low density residential, I don't know if there's been an attempt to beautify or fix, especially on, I don't know, my south, north. But on the right-hand side of Bristol, there's a lot of low density apartment buildings on that side, and they could use a facelift. They could use, beautification. I don't know if that's been, an approach, if the building owners on that side have been contacted, but yeah, urban neighborhood along Bristol. I don't know if that's, yeah, I'm not seeing it.
Chair Oliva, it's our job to demystify this for the commission, so we're happy to answer these types of questions. The nitty gritty of like the standards, like, setbacks and things like that, Siri will get into as we get into sort of further discussions about the specifics of the zoning code. But the map that is on the screen is from the general plan. So that's already been adopted by the city council, right? Through the planning commission and the city council. But just to clarify, the darker purple that you're seeing at the bottom of the map, that's where related Bristol is. That's the most intensity. Then that lavender color above it, that's the more urban neighborhood scale that you're talking about. The project that we saw earlier, like Meritage Townhomes, that's the type of product that would be generated by that land use designation, if you can visualize that. Probably 3 to 4 story townhomes, less intensity and more home ownership oriented, as opposed to related Bristol or like the other projects that we're hearing about in that area that are more intense. Those are meant to be right up against South Coast Plaza and away from those residential neighborhoods. And then to your point about like, neighborhoods and improvements and things like that, that's a vehicle to get there is through a development agreement most of the times, and also development impact fees, things like that. So there's ways you can arrive at the same goal. Like the related Bristol project, thanks to the commission's leadership and the council's leadership as well, will give the city a $22 million community benefit payment over time, and the city council can elect to do what they want with that money in those neighborhoods and throughout the city. So it's kind of like big picture, but I wanted to kind of clarify that what we're seeing on the map is already what was established by the general plan. So now it's about coming up with the nitty gritty standards of how do you get there. And I wanted to provide you the context of like what you saw earlier is probably what you would get along the area that you were discussing.
Thank you.
Are there any other clarifying questions?
Yes, I have one too. Sorry. For the business park, I know it provides the example of the OC register property. Would there be any residential in any area that's a business park?
In any area of the business park?
Yeah.
Well, we're working on the list of permitted uses right now to present to the Planning Commission for consideration. To date, I don't recollect anyone recommending residential in the business park. That's really that light industrial, to borrow the terminology used earlier, which is intended to be that buffer between the existing residential and the M1, M2 zones.
Okay, and how large is that site?
Well, this is an example of the discussion about the interface between residential and industrial that appears in the general plan. And I thought it was a good visual that shows that relationship between the two. I don't know specifically if this is an area where the business park use would apply.
Okay, thank you. I'll make additional comments during our discussion.
Very good. And I think there was a question from Commissioner Escamilla.
Yeah, sorry, I was just wondering if we're looking at anything within the institutional areas as well. So there's like 2 major points there. Number one, I think that single use civic centers are not a great experiment in urban land use. So having mixed uses within the civic center are probably positive, and that's all institutional. Number two, we are having, I think, what would they call it? A secular and significant decline in enrollment that isn't going to change anytime soon. So we're probably going to be seeing some surplus in the school district site properties as far as alternative uses. And I think maybe some of the initial planning as to what can go into some of those institutional sites would be of interest. I don't know how we're exactly going to handle it, or if we should start talking about that now rather than when site-specific considerations start coming up.
Thank you for that. Okay, seeing no other questions, we'll move on. Just wanted to make a quick note. This slide may be a little overwhelming to the reader, and that's intentional. The city currently has, I think, 97 total specific developments, unless we've added some recently since this was updated, but no, we haven't. As part of this project, we've completed a review of all of the 97 specific developments, and we've identified some for removal, some for incorporation into the zoning code, and then a handful to retain for the future. So then the exciting part is, not that the rest hasn't been exciting, but the exciting part is the discussion of proposed new processes. And as we talk about these processes, I want you to keep in mind the idea that we brought to you at the beginning about modernization and streamlining. So looking at these processes, sometimes they're unnecessarily onerous and costly for developers and business owners. And so that's part of the reason why we're looking to come up with new alternatives to our current processes. The overall approach is to decrease processing time and expense by adjusting applicability of permit types by different uses and by creating a new permit type under the director's authority. And we'll step through these one by one. So first, in terms of staff level review, we have a planning clearance, which would have no change. That's essentially the review that happens for a by right project before it gets submitted to building for plan check. Second, moving up, we've got land use certificates, moving up in terms of complexity. We have land use certificates, which is an existing type of application. We aren't proposing any change to that, but we are looking at changing the applicability so that these are focused exclusively on semi-permanent ancillary uses rather than temporary uses as well. Which brings me to the next one, temporary use permits. So we're separating out those that were considered, those uses that were considered under land use certificates. So we now have something specific for special events and mobile services. Moving into director level review, we have the development project review, which is an existing permit type, and the applicability is being reviewed for revision. Next, we have a proposed new minor conditional use permit. The intent of this is to allow for staff level review for things that might not be, might not elevate themselves to the level of a CUP, but we'd like to benefit from the application of conditions. As we review the uses permitted tables for each different zoning district, we're looking at how that would be applicable to different use types. And then for the minor exception, that's an existing use permit, and no change is proposed to the process. However, the applicability is to be revised. Again, the intent is to streamline the process by allowing for staff level review. So projects that currently were seen or are being seen as a variance could become a minor exception. And then at planning commission level, we have conditional use permits and variances. So for both of these, there's no change to the process itself. However, we are looking at the applicability for those different use types. And those would go down, some would go down from a conditional use permit to a minor conditional use permit for review by staff, or a variance down to a minor exception for review by staff.
So I know a lot of this is new to the commission, but I want to give you some examples of recent projects just to help ground you in what Siri just shared. If you all remember, about maybe 6-7 months ago, there was a subdivision on Silver Drive that came here. 2 existing homes that simply wanted to draw a lot line down the middle, but one of them was off the 50-foot minimum front yard width by just under 2 feet. It was like 1.75. It's a full-blown variance, right? Like extra close to $6,000 could not be done administratively, had to come here before the commission. The applicant had to pay a mailing services vendor, thousands of dollars for mailing labels. The radius in this city is set at 1,000-foot radius notification, right? I'm not saying that it's a bad process, but I'm saying that maybe there's another way of doing these things where we still retain the quality control and we have clear codes, stuff that really communicates outwardly what the city would be asking for improvements, but doesn't necessarily elevate itself to the level of a full-blown 7-member planning commission with all that time and expense. Another one that Siri mentioned earlier, like the minor conditional use permit, that is something that exists in small and large cities across the state. My hometown, Upland, has a similar process where basically like the notice is sent to adjacent property owners, and if no one has any issues, it's approved, and the director can impose conditions that are case by case to make sure that it fits in contextually. In Irvine, it's very similar. Like a city that we often compete with for investment in Santa Ana has a process for things that you still want to be able to condition on a case-by-case basis, but again, spare like a small business owner the expense of thousands of dollars of mailing labels and a full-blown public hearing and all the staff report and, you know, thousands of dollars in a CUP application for us. So I'm encouraging you guys to think three-dimensionally, that these are not just because, oh, you know, we don't like the way things are right now. It's because they actually have real time savings and money savings for our constituency.
So this is the administrative process, right, to streamline, which means that city council has to grant you authority to do that, right? Where is the check and balance in terms of the standard that engages the oversight, which is, I guess that's right. I would agree with you. I'm not arguing for us to have more talk and, you know, nitpicking and you know, tweaking. But, you know, I'm just asking the devil advocate question of like, how do we go about it?
Yeah, absolutely. That is all to be flushed out in the zoning code update that we would want your input on, right? In some cities, the director, if they say, hey, this seems a little bit more than my level, I'll remand it to the planning commission, right? That's totally one option. There's always appeal rights too. If a adjacent owner doesn't like what the decision was and that decision is published in a transparent way, then the adjacent owners or community can file an appeal. Also having clear codes up front, that the codes contain standards that you guys in the city council adopt, also makes sure that the playing field is level for the players.
I had a quick question on, I guess as we're looking at this and looking at maybe substandard lots, do we have kind of an idea as to where this, like a substandard lot would be falling under? Is it still being considered kind of as a variance, or is it something slightly below that? Mostly considering, you know, 4,000 square foot remnant residential or commercial properties that, again, no one's developed for decades because they don't meet our basic standards for that zone.
So we haven't gotten through those kinds of specifics. But based on the description that was just provided, ideally a project would be considered a minor exception rather than a variance for a substandard lot like that. I hear implied in your comment a recommendation, and we've made note of it.
Just to add, another thing we were looking at is through flexibility that would be built in through the non-conforming section that would apply to such situations.
Any other clarifying questions on that? Okay, we'll move on. One of the key questions that we need to answer as a city is how we handle residential and mixed-use projects. And the reason why this is an important question for us is because the state law has required streamlined review for projects that comply with objective design standards. So as part of the zoning code update, we are creating objective design standards, meaning that there's a simple yes or no answer to whether or not a project complies. And the reason for that is because, of course, the state wants to see us bring housing to market more quickly. And so we have a couple different options for how we could treat these types of projects that are compliant with objective design standards. One is for housing projects to stay at the staff level, in which case we would review and approve all ODS compliant projects. The other is for those to go to the Planning Commission, and essentially the Planning Commission would do the same thing, review and approve projects that are compliant with all objective design standards. An important point is that for these types of projects, Planning Commission does no longer have discretionary review. In terms of the pros and cons, at a staff level review, the cost would be lower for developers and property owners, and it would be a more efficient use of city resources. So we wouldn't be preparing for Planning Commission public hearing, and instead it would stay at the staff level. When we do go to the planning commission, that tends to be a higher cost to developers and property owners, less efficient use of staff resources or city resources. And also it can lead to stakeholder frustration, because when stakeholders come to a public hearing or come to hear a review of that kind of a project, they believe that they'll have an opportunity to make a comment and see changes in the design. But if a project is compliant with those objective design standards, we can't be making changes to the design of a project. Yes.
Sorry, it's me again. I'm just trying to bring color to some of these concepts. So commissioners, you might remember a density bonus agreement project at 1212 East 4th Street. This was about 2 years ago. Density bonus agreement, exactly the situation series chatting about. And if you all are familiar, do you remember Desi Reyes? He's the president of the Saddleback View Neighborhood Association. After all that deliberation about the design and everything, basically, I remember him making a comment here like to the effect of, so basically you're saying this is all for nothing, right? Because density bonus agreements, the city's hands are so strongly tied in many ways. So it's an example of how you have a process that reflects a bygone era. We made the applicant spend thousands of dollars on project notifications to the community, all to get people to come out to a public hearing just to be told we really can't condition this in ways beyond what staff's recommending tonight. So I'm not saying, again, that you must change these things, but I want you to think about these past experiences that you've had as commissioners as we go through some of these recommended changes to our code.
Are there any questions about this question of what to do with residential and mixed use projects? Okay, very good. Well, that brings me to the end of the presentation portion of tonight's study session, and we'll move into discussion. We shared with you prior to the meeting a set of questions for your consideration. And at this time, we'll start going through those questions. In the interest in time, rather than going one by one, I think we'll go by sets. So the first set of questions has to do with how the city might address parking concerns, particularly considering new state laws that affect a large portion of the city where we can no longer apply minimum parking requirements. Secondly, how might the city address characteristics of development, like we talked about earlier, such as the mix of uses, open space, reuse of existing buildings, and that type of thing. And then third, how might the city be more business and developer friendly with regard to regulations, review, and approval processes? With that, I'll turn it over to you, Chair, for the discussion.
Thank you, Sari. Great presentation. Commissioner Pham, for these set of questions, any comments or answers?
Well, I think everyone always complains there's a lack of parking, even when, and then especially it gets worse when there's concessions that the state kind of asks of us. So I think it kind of brings back to, can we explore more products that either city-owned or developer delivered that provides more parking? Kind of like a parking structure, residential over parking structure, or a wraparound building that has parking in the middle. Obviously, it's more cost prohibitive, but eventually, people are just going to keep on complaining that there's not enough parking. And to be frank, I think single-family residential, four bedrooms and below, you're only required to have 2 parking spots, I believe. But that's like given like the 70s style home where you have street parking, and so you kind of make up for that. But with all the townhouses product that we're permitting, 2-car garage, and then you park outside and you get fined. I get it. You can't really do much about it, but it's going to create issues down the road, in my opinion. So I'm not sure how you're going to propose, or can we think of other solutions that not just say, okay, state says we need to reduce parking, but is there alternative products that we can encourage that provides additional parking in lieu of the lots of parking that we have to have because of the density bonuses? Yeah. and no one likes parking structures, but I think parking structures tastefully done that, I don't think any residents are going to complain that there's a parking structure near their house, but then they're not going to be fighting over putting a cone in front of their house to save parking after street sweeping, right? My thought on that, and that kind of blends into the mixed use issue of it. If it's just straight townhouse or straight house and flex, then obviously quote unquote is mixed use, but in my opinion, not really. Yeah, I think a podium and residential seems more appropriate. That's all.
Commissioner Escamilla.
All right, well, this is a fun one. So I'm going to try to answer your questions as directly as I can without all the other digressions. So I guess for me, the fundamental question is who's going to pay for it, I guess, so to the late Don Shoup or, oh my gosh, parking isn't free and they're. That's me. Oh, okay, then it wasn't me. So yeah, parking isn't free, right? There is some cost borne by the developer, the property owner, somebody somewhere, the city in most cases. So I do think that one of the fundamental things we have to do with our zoning code is allow for a decoupling of the parking. So I think right now our code prohibits any developer from charging for parking, which I think is something that creates a disincentive for efficient use of that parking space, right? So, it's not necessarily popular to say, but no one necessarily pays directly for the parking spot in front of their home. If there was a mechanism to do so under certain permitted parameters, I think you'd get a much more efficient use of the parking that does exist out there. So over on Highland Street and Rate, you can see that everyone, parks on the street and no one parks in their driveway or in their garage. And that's pretty consistent, right? My own family does that. And it's very much a tragedy of the common situation in which there is no financial incentive for the individual to basically park on their own driveway if there is a parking spot in front of it, in front of them, because it's just like, hey, I have an extra parking spot. I can invite 2 more people over today. If there was some kind of minor payment system or ability to reserve or something where the city does take a little bit more control over the offsite parking on the street, that's really, I think, where this question will be answered. I don't think we're going to answer it on the on-site off-street parking. I think at that point, we're really losing already a lot of our available open space, we're losing a lot of our available developable space in pursuit of making parking extremely convenient for people without having any kind of economic consequence of that convenience. So that's where I'm at. It's much more of a, hey, I think it's a balanced approach, but there should be some way for the city to utilize one of its greatest resources, which is we technically, with the public lands, right, own the public right of way, which then can be used to either subsidize the storage of a person's personal property, the car, or can be used to maintain that convenience. So I think that's where the conversation would have to go with Public Works. On the offsite parking, one thing that I think you'll find in a lot of our residential areas is that if you create a garage, it's not necessarily going to be used for parking. So it's almost easier and better to create parking pads or things that are just, we have a 2-car garage minimum in our R1 zones. If you did it as a parking pad, people would be much more likely to actually use it for parking rather than as an enclosed space. That's not going to be necessarily that useful for new developments. We are kind of going to a townhouse model. The only other thing I would say there is if we're looking at the basic requirements for mechanical lifts within these townhome sites. So whether that's with requirements for the capacity to add a lift, so ceiling height with electrical and also just kind of, the flooring capacity to be able to handle the extra weight. So I think all of those standards are probably what we'd be wanting to look at within the townhouse development forum. The other thing I think is also that we also actively discourage the utilization of these lifts in unenclosed areas. So I think our mechanical equipment provision requires extra screening. So there are certain locations that don't allow individual property owners to install lifts outside because then it's impossible to screen. So there might be an exemption to that within the code, and that would add additional capacity in parking in those spaces that need it. So that's, I guess, just on the parking. And I don't know if we're going question by question, so I should stop here and then get back to question number 2, or if I should continue to question number 2.
You can continue. I think if we can be as succinct as possible, and I want to say staff's open to emails from us if
Right.
we develop additional comments or ideas that come to us post-meeting, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Let's see. How may the city develop address characteristics of development? I think on the objective design standards, really I'm looking at like just materials in impact, right? So I think that's something that we enjoy about certain areas in our city is that they have certain material qualities to them. So the utilization of brick, stone, wood siding, those are types of things that I think make certain amount of sense to try to include at least objectively if the district requires it, or there are certain standards there. I guess that's really more just the design. I think people do like revival styles in the city, in this community, though I don't know how you would turn that into an objective design standard. And I think you're definitely on the right track as far as making more of the processes administrative, or that business kind of friendly approach. I do think that there's probably still additional flexibility to be hashed out. So right now, my big concern with the zoning code update is we still have a relatively large professional office space designation throughout the city. And I'm not sure I don't know how utilized some of those properties are, right? So if those are areas that have extreme vacancy rates, what is the trigger point in which the city then says, like, we need to have different types of use, right? Are certain segments of the professional office space much more equivalent to a business park idea, even though it's not buffering industrial, but it is already in a zone that's, maybe buffering the freeway to the residential area, and then allows for some redevelopment within those spaces to a reasonable degree. That's where I'm seeing a little bit more flexibility that's needed. I definitely think that, in my ideal world, I'm kind of looking at like a Japanese zoning model where certain types of uses are allowed, and it's like, it's allowed in all of these zones. And then if it's a little bit more restrictive, it's, in certain zones that it's not, but that you basically should allow different types of uses across the zones, because I think that's one of the things that makes it hard for a lot of just regular people when they come into the city and they're like, hey, I'd like to do this. It's like, well, you can do it in the C1, but you can't do it in your professional office space, even though, like, from a visual perspective, a layperson would not understand the difference between the zones. And in many regards, they're not that different. Like in some ways, a commercial corridor to a professional office. So allowing a different ability to flex uses. I don't know if that means you build in an administrative appeal saying like, hey, I would like to do X, Y, and Z. I think it applies. And then figure out a way to do that. Because I think some of the best ideas that we're going to get are from individual business and property owners asking for something and us not realizing that we don't allow it. So this is like coming in from my experience of what I've seen that had to be denied. But I'm sure that there's so many other people that would like to, hey, if you've been denied, would you like to ask this question of an allowed use? So that's where I'm going for the flexibility. And I don't know where that, should happen, but I do think that it is an approach that we'd like to do. Diverse housing types. I think on the diverse housing types, there are certain
Commissioners, if we can stay on this set of questions.
Oh, sorry, this set of questions, or
if we can just stay on this set of questions.
oh, first 3. Sorry. Okay. Okay.
If we're good on those 3.
Yeah.
Okay, Commissioner Benninger.
I don't know how to follow that, but we have talked different things about parking. One of them I thought was a good idea, and I don't know where it sits today, and that's the fact of unused parking, church lots that are not used during the week or on evenings. And I would love to see us develop a zone that would allow them to do that and even make money at it. It will help these different groups, even shopping centers for that matter. So I think thinking outside the box and considering new ways in which we can address that would work out fine. Kind of with these questions, but really overall too, if I just slide this one in, are we looking at other cities as what they're doing and picking the best that we see out there?
Yes, and we look heavily at our consultant to help us to understand what they're observing and what they're doing in other cities. They help us do that research, and then we identify other jurisdictions that we like as well, and we do the research as in addition.
Okay, because I also like the idea, and it goes with these also, is the more flexibility, more empowerment at a lower staff level. I've always found that very helpful in every industry I've been in, to push decision down to the lowest possible level. If they make an error, you got to judge whether it was an error out of stupidity or was it an error out of good intent. But still, you speed things up when you push it to the lowest level. That's all I have to say.
Vice Chair Ramos.
Thank you. So for the first question on parking, I know I've heard some recommendations for parking structures. When I hear that, I'm just a little concerned knowing that we have very limited land. So I wouldn't want us to prioritize a parking structure versus like open space or something that's residential. And I think I've had this conversation before with Commissioner Escamilla, but there are a lot of parking lots throughout the city that are not used overnight. And I think that's when we have the greatest parking need. So what I would want to see the city do in addressing our parking concerns is figuring out what kind of partnership can be developed with some of these office buildings. So I live in Ward 6, and there's a lot of county parking lots that hold hundreds of cars and are empty overnight, and they've actually locked them now, so cars can't park there. But I wonder what it would look like to have some sort of relationship where maybe residents that live in the neighborhood and don't have enough parking can pay a nominal fee to use those lots overnight, be out by 6 a.m., 7 a.m. Also, I heard somebody talk, well, I think Manny Escamilla in a different way mentioned the district. But again, our school district has schools in our neighborhoods where there is great parking. So what can it look like to utilize their parking lots overnight and over the weekends? But yeah, there's just a lot of empty parking lots overnight. And I think if they were being used in a way, they'd also be activated and would deter any negative activities that may be happening there, and could help with like lighting and security if residents are able to pay something. Let's see, what else had I put? So I think that was it on parking. On the second question, how might the city address characteristics of development? So under open space, I know there's a desire to maybe request more open space. I just wonder what that looks like when we have limitations with like density bonuses, like we saw tonight. So if someone's getting a density bonus, they get a concession. So I just want to, I don't think we have an answer today, but just how do we work around that and to ensure that we're still getting a bit more where we can. I also know that there is a lot of vacant land throughout the city. Some of it is oddly shaped. A lot of it is on Bristol. A lot of it is surplus and has to go through the Surplus Lands Act, which requires that it first be prioritized for open space or affordable housing. So just what does it look like, or how, if at all, can the city go above and beyond to ensure that those oddly shaped vacant lots can become open space? So I know the city has had a good relationship with Thrive Santana, and they've been able to take at least one lot for now and develop something there. So yeah, we just want to make note of that. And with the city being more business and developer friendly, so I think part of this would be one of the last slides that talked about maybe changing what has to go to the Planning Commission and what can be reviewed by staff. So I understand that when things come to the Planning Commission, there's often higher expenses for developers or property owners. So I would like to see what we can do to become more business and friendly and developer friendly. But at the same thought, I have some mixed thoughts and concerns. I would also want to ensure that residents are still receiving proper noticing. So as we become more friendly, I don't want to lose the noticing aspect. Just at the last commission meeting, we had some residents share that they didn't receive noticing because they're outside the 1,000 feet, which I understand. But so as much as possible, I want to ensure that there is still some noticing requirement. And I think this would also be of great importance to our city council as they actually expanded the noticing requirement from 500 to 1,000 feet with their sunshine ordinance. So just want to make sure that as we consider streamlining any processes, that we ensure that the noticing remains and that we're still creating opportunities for community engagement, whether they be at the planning commission or in some other way. Yeah, and just on that, like I actually got contacted by a resident today asking like, hey, I didn't see the item from last week on this agenda. So just ensuring as we go through any process and as we try to just streamline that, we remember our residents and the spirit of the sunshine ordinance. I don't know to what extent that has been shared with you, but I would recommend looking at it and talking to staff that has been here for a long time, over a decade, to understand like how that came about. And that really came from a lot of community pressure. And it was the last, I think, Councilmember Lopez that expanded that noticing. So yeah, just really important to me that our community remains engaged, and it would really suck if they lost that as we've involved them in this process, and that anything moving forward would really remove their ability to engage in the same way. Thank you.
Commissioner Wu.
In regards to parking, there are people that live in rooming houses, and there are people that park in front of your house that come from 2 or 3 blocks over. They get dropped off their car, and then they go back, and then they take the car to work in the morning. Then parking downtown makes it kind of hard to park and enjoy downtown. It doesn't seem to, downtown no longer seem to work. I'm not interested in the restaurants. I don't have no place to visit down there. It just doesn't seem it's going through a transition, which is, I think my overall discussion is nothing is ever the same. It doesn't remain static. We're a transitioning city. And depending on where we go, my biggest concern is the economic base. Who is paying for the services? The COVID money is gone. The COVID rent money is gone. And we have one faction wanting more police our problems out. And then we have another function that is looking to make it more user-friendly for the people that live here, to have a good quality of life and healthy neighborhood. But the fundamental question is that how do they support themselves? How do the youth in the program find jobs? You know, if industries are disappearing, your Macy's is gone. Your Walmart is shutting down. Your first job is not there. And who is doing the workforce investment activity for the city to look at this? I was talking to some musicians, and they were thinking about collaborating with dancers, and but the Arts and Learning Conservatory is in Costa Mesa. We don't have something like that where the filmmakers and other artists can have a little art colony. But the art colony today, without the subsidies that goes to PBS and, you know, to the arts, makes it so that my recommendation of looking at supporting the art, you know, futile, because of the subsidies are not coming from the federal level to stimulate, that then get local foundations also to go along. That becomes a industry. So I don't know what future going to lie for this city, but I am talking to people at other levels and other economic level, the CEOs of companies and the corporate attorneys, and we're trying to figure out where we're going to go, because we don't want to see the downfall of civilization. We do like the city. This city has a lot to offer in terms of diversity, and it's diversity that makes us vibrant. You know, I was part of the All-American City back in the 90s, and my argument was we have problems, We have poor police relationship. We have urban renewal that tears up our neighborhood, but we're working on it. And working on it seemed to be the all-American thing, that if we could bring people with different opinions together and respect each other, we could come for the going towards the future. So I would say the other thing is to get the community to buy into the future. Some feel that although they've been here for a while, they bought their home, they seem to think that their interest is not being heard. They do see people come to city council in large group, and they feel that they're getting more attention. It may be just a perception, you know, but at the same time, I think that between the old and new, what defines Santa Ana? Where are we going? You know, how will we develop job opportunity in what industry? Who is doing it? You know, I was nudging Mike and say, well, you know, you're in charge of economic development. What business have you brought in lately? You know, so maybe we need to kind of talk about that on a more interesting basis. There are other communities where you could park and you could walk around shopping for old furniture and stuff, but a lot of people don't like old furniture these days. You know, you could look at my garage and none of my kids want all those, you know, antiques we bought, you know. So changing values. So maybe if that's the generation that's more developing apps and, you know, websites and, you know, other kinds of things in this informational age, I don't know how long that's going to last. But while it's lasting, the coders and the people going through those to Santa Ana College, Santiago Canyon and all these, they're learning something and they're getting research grant to research how to improve their water. But that investment of the dollars from the federal government to subsidize their research is not there. So the infrastructure is changing for what we had normal for the last 15 years. And going forward, there's a lot of unknown. So I kind of think that we need let's try to save what we have. Let's also look at how we could build some reserve for the future, because we have parts of the community due to their economic level, if the bottom drops out of there, the emergency services and the food programs and all that may not be there to meet insufficient need. We have generous people. We got good churches that work at that level, but I have a great concern in terms of, you know, will we be able to weather through this with a callous population of political thinkers who say, well, you're the problem because you're poor. No, I'm not a problem. You made me poor. Okay. How do I get out of this without you also making it easier for me to be lifted up? Okay. So if you've ever been a waitress, if you've ever been a bartender, if you've ever been a bouncer, and at that level of sharing a room with someone to make ends meet, then you know what I'm talking about. You're one step away from being out on the street. And as I see new homeless people out there, it's not because they're drug addict. They become drug addict after being out there for a while, and we have more death coming from fentanyl. But the reason they got there, they lost their support system, or they didn't have it, or they lost their roommate, and now they're in crisis. So at the Archway open house opening, they said, Supervisor Katrina Froda said, we'll be building our emergency housing to get people off the street. Now we need the in-between housing, transitioning off of there into the low income housing that Commissioner Uri been advocating to make sure we meet that in housing. So we need the spectrum, and Santa Ana's been best at it. We meet our regional arena goals, but we also have a sensitivity of helping those getting a hand up as they transition and build intergenerational wealth. So the building of intergenerational wealth is something that I see that we need to kind of place some emphasis on helping our population to do. Otherwise, we become a consumer city where we depend on government to bail us out, but we don't have the ability to help ourselves out, if that kind of makes sense. So when you look at the kind of businesses that come in, it's sort of like not everyone will make a good business home here, but there are those unique thinkers that we could attract from somewhere, whether it's from Philadelphia, from up in the Bay Area. They're around. We just have to bring them down here. And do we have the transit infrastructure for that kind of population? Because they don't like to drive, but they're kind of mobile between cities. Today they're here, tomorrow they're in Washington, next day they're in New York. They may be in Paris the next day, but they have high salary jobs. What kind of housing do they want to? And they can contribute to the infrastructure of the city. So I don't know. You brought up a lot of questions. I just have more questions. They're not a tax. I think it's great that, like we did with the general plan, we got people thinking about the future. We got people thinking about the city in terms of neighborhood, housing, businesses, and all that, and traffic in the street. Now you're asking another question. If we have all these nice little colors and zoning, then will this give us the tools we need to bring business in the area with a diversity in terms of residents with income? I don't know. I'm kind of hopeful to get you starting, but we face other challenges that are beyond our control in other jurisdictions. So I'm sorry for taking your time on this, but I'm planning a big summit to talk about those things that include people like Cheswa to the CEO Council and OC Forum. And I'm trying to figure out how do I get everyone that think differently together, to talk. Because we need better solution than we have. We need a different transformation of our culture to think about caring each other. We need to renew our social contract with each other, because we're all Americans. Sometimes I have to ask, when will I be called American, even though I am an American, but I'm treated like a foreigner in my own city. So,
Commissioner Wu, thank you so much. And
yeah, I'm shutting up. I'm sorry.
No, it's just zoning. Zoning. Thank you.
Well, so you shouldn't ask the question of what we think.
Vice Chair Ramos.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I just wanted to make one more comment on open space. So I just wanted to also touch on Willowick, the Willowick Golf Course. So I know that shows up on our map as open space, and it technically is, but isn't accessible to the community the way a normal park would be, because it's a golf course and obviously very limited in its use. So just want to note that as a site that should be revisited. I know in the past, so the golf course is in city property, but it's actually owned by the city of Garden Grove. I know in the past there was interest in redeveloping that site. I think there was like a community proposal to have it become a state park and also include affordable housing. At the time, there wasn't the political will in Garden Grove to do that, but it's a new council. So, I just would encourage the city to revisit that and see how we can actually create or transform that site into something that's more usable open space. And at the same time, have it be mixed use. So increasing our affordable housing there as well. And happy to talk afterwards on that as well. Thank you.
I love the ideas that my colleagues brought up, using parking spaces that aren't used overnight. I just know that putting the burden of paying for parking on some of our residents probably isn't ideal. Some of our residents probably can afford to pay for parking, but if we were to come to some sort of parking management agreement with some of these locations, whether it's a church, some of these county spaces, schools, maybe the school district. My other concern is possible vandalism. But with the right security, it could be a good idea. I just don't know what that parking management plan would look like. I think if we were to devise something and look at the management of it, I think of Thornton Park when the security was put there and the little cars were given to the security guards. They were just running over everything when they were in there. So I don't know if we need to like really revisit how we do security on some properties, but things to think about.
Isn't the city having a lighting discussion? How to light up the city? That helps with the security thing.
That could be a solution, possible solution.
Well, walkable streets, safety.
As for mixed use, no ideas on that just yet, but for open spaces, I feel like open spaces should be true to definition open space as much as possible. So if we are, you know, finding those spaces, if we can keep them open spaces, that would be ideal. Vice Chair Ramos did bring up the fact that there are those oddly shaped locations throughout the city. Yeah, if it's not a safe space for a park, maybe we don't make it a park, but if it could be a park, yeah, let's go for it. For reuse, I know that there are a lot of, they tend to be industrial buildings, so I don't know how to reuse those buildings, because I know when it comes to zoning, when it comes to the overlay, when it comes to use, we do want housing, but we probably don't want housing in industrial spaces, so spaces that come to mind that could be reused, that seem to be unused right now, probably wouldn't be ideal for housing, but there are buildings that I feel that could be, especially like off of Warner and like Main. I feel like there's a lot of buildings on that side. As for more business friendly, just looking at the website right now, I feel like we could revamp our FAQs to be a little bit more user friendly, especially if you're a first time business owner and this is your first time starting your business and it's, you know, you're a small business owner and you're trying to get it going here in Santa Ana. Maybe we could work on our SEO a little bit and just, you know, how can we make it easier for folks? So maybe like one pagers to where this is your guide on how to start a business in Santa Ana, or for developers, oh, you want to build a property in our city, this is how you do it. So maybe developing guides that are a little visual, a little bit of like a roadmap. Granted, not all the information will be there, but something that'll be the initial, oh, this is what I have to do. On the website, look at XYZ and it'll take you, and you know, things like that could probably be a little bit business and developer friendly, because people are looking for things like that, especially if they've never worked in Santa Ana. Maybe it's something that could be a little inviting, be friendly digitally prior to having a conversation with staff. Maybe that could be a nice introduction before speaking to anyone. Maybe that could be something we could possibly do. Does anybody on the commission have any other thoughts or ideas on this first set of questions, or we can move on to the next set of questions? Commissioner Escamilla? Okay.
I think you just stay on that first set on parking. One thing I think is actually the open space and parking itself might not be mutually exclusive. So some of the best parking spaces or parking structures I've ever seen are the ones that have like volleyball and basketball and like tennis on top. I think that's always like a reasonable use. That top floor is always the hardest to get to. So, you know, it's one of those things where my favorite parking lots or parking structures are those that you can also then recreate on top. So just wanted to make sure to note that on the first one.
All right, so the next set of questions, Siri, did you want to introduce them, or I can read them off, whatever works?
Sure, I can do that. So for our last set of questions, we have 3 again. First, how might the city promote construction of diverse housing types? Siri likes to talk back. Welcome to my world. Secondly, how might the city retain industrial uses and jobs while addressing impacts to homes and schools? And lastly, what other issues we want to know do you have concern with that you'd like to see addressed through the zoning code?
Thank you. Commissioner Pham.
I was just waiting to be called on. I think diverse housing, I think it's a luxury that probably we don't have in terms of a lot of different types of housing. I think a lot of conversation always ends up being how diverse the price range is, to be honest. So when I think about that, my thinking is the cheapest type of housing that we can provide is housing that the land has already been paid for, i.e. the ADU program. To me, I think that's the cheapest form of housing is when someone has a mortgage, they have a extra land in the back, and what they're investing in is the structure and not completely developing an entire new site. And more diverse housing to me is the diverse type of developer. So what we see commonly is either a mom and pop, this is my house, I'm developing an ADU, or I'm developing 85 units, whether it be 85 townhouses or 85 apartment housing. But if there's a way for the city to promote or create a pathway for small developers, I'm talking about a contractor and someone that has quite a bit of equity, they're able to develop 5 units, 4 units, triplex, duplexes. Sometimes we forget about those. I haven't seen, the state or many people kind of promote that, but sometimes the bite-sized housing is probably more economical for the developer as well as a person that's purchasing or renting it. So, as much as we like to promote high density, but maybe the small to low density would be a good shot at trying to get more housing stock. And then the last is, I'm going back to townhouses. A lot of townhouses that are proposed are typically 3 stories, and typically they'll have a flex space underneath it, whether it be because they need to make it ADA compliant because it's a part of a 5-unit structure. But if there's a way for us to encourage a JADU as built in that townhouse, so that it's obviously a very multi-family product. But if you have a townhouse that has a JADU at the bottom has a compliant, efficient kitchen, then you're able to spread that cost of home ownership. So someone that needs to buy can only be able to approach home ownership through a vehicle of a townhouse, but they can't subsidize that mortgage cost. They can illegally rent out their room or sublease or whatever it is, or the product already exists where there's a JADU at the bottom floor where they can rent it out to another person or a couple, and that shared of costs, I think, would help alleviate the diverse of costs in housing. And then I think we should reward people who identify lots that are non-compliant, but provide a solution. Maybe they can build a house, but it's a little bit smaller than normal. They're more kind of creative about how they live. So what I'm thinking is, let's say you have a house that typical head clearance to be able to make it a usable square footage. So usable area is that you need to meet at least 6'8" head clearance, right? But you see a lot of people, they're very attracted to tiny homes, right? Some of the tiny homes have their kitchen at the bottom, they have a sleeping platform, but if it's to our code, we wouldn't consider that usable, that platform usable because it doesn't meet head clearance. So, a tiny home is a lot easier to finance and to build. Obviously, that touches into building code issues, but be more flexible in the home size, the minimum home size, not the maximum home size, the minimum home size, I think would be appropriate. As for the industrial use, I see it as like a nesting approach where, back a couple of hearing ago, there's a lot of existing hazardous or intense M2 use that people really want to hold on to. Obviously, we don't want to encourage that, but if there are certain businesses who might not qualify for light M1, or there might be M1 plus, maybe we nestle it in where it's zone M1, but within the epicenter of that M1 zone, we provide a conditional use permit for, the recycling yard or the auto repair shop that kind of maybe off gas a little bit too much, things like that. But then the lighter M1 becomes a buffer around it, and then we transition to maybe a larger boulevard and then to residential. And so we don't have the situation where obviously it's not our fault, but the recycling center is next to someone's new townhouse or someone's new home. But then it becomes more of an issue, or school. And then this is going to be unpopular, but I'll say it. Issues concerning zoning codes. So I think we need to be a bit more, our zoning code should express more concrete language on land use of public right-of-way. And also a management, because obviously I'm talking about the homeless population as well as the populations that are using our right-of-way, right? And that's for council to decide whether or not how they deal with it. But it is a land use issue as well, where people are using the right-of-way not correctly. And I see city funds being used to clean the same areas multiple times within a couple of weeks. And so I think that there should be certain languages, even from a land use level, that clarifies the property owner's rights in the way they manage that barrier between the right-of-way, their property line, and the front yards that we seem to really love, the front setback that we seem to really want to encourage. But you're putting whether it's commercial, residential, or any of the above, you're putting the onus on the owner to provide that setback, but the city is not providing very good language for them to be able to manage a condition that's out of their hands. So I would like to see a little case study, something a bit more robust in terms of language would be good. That's all for me. Thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Scamilla.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. All right. So I guess just on housing, right? We're starting there. I do think that there's maybe some opportunities within the C1 zones, the ones we had pointed out. I think the best example is south of First Street between Flower and Bristol. The entire southern section of the street in the corridor, well, actually, I guess on both sides, is commercial. But you have a lot of single-family homes that have been there that haven't gone anywhere. The whole thought was, this is 1962. That entire thing is going to be a commercial corridor. Kind of left that C1 zoning in place. A couple of lots that were either like demolished or like burned down. I'm not really even sure when they disappeared. Haven't been redeveloped and are just kind of sitting empty. They probably are assessed at a property valuation of, I'm going to guess, of like $30,000 at this point. They bring in no property taxes, and there's no real incentive other than to just hold the land at that point. So even if you were to allow like in all C1 zones, like a single family residential, you would at least create some sort of use for it. I don't know exactly like what that requirement would be or how flexible you should have that, because you don't want to take away your commercial zoning, but you do definitely want to allow at least for somebody to build a home in an otherwise empty parcel. At that point, you're going to get at least the property taxes out of it or something else. So I do think that looking at those really small C1 sites as an opportunity for housing is huge. Definitely hearing with what Commissioner Fan had mentioned on removing some of the minimum size requirements for housing. I do think that, if it meets building code, I don't think we need to kind of get in the way of it. So at this point, micro housing, micro studio units in a downtown area are the closest that I think we can get back to like an SRO model where really people need a minor kitchenette, a bathroom, and they want their own private space and their own door. And I think that that's what a lot of people are seeking, right? It's like the trade-off between living in an urban city environment and having additional space or having the affordability. And right now, I think as a city art code really goes towards, you must have all these amenities. And if you can't afford all these amenities, this extra space and this extra parking and these extra nice to haves, then you're not, we're not going to build any products for you. So I do think that flexibility on that kind of, I'm a newly out of college student and I have this one flexible unit that I live in a very transit walkable area and I don't have a car yet. Those are the types I'm looking for, people that just decided never to drive or, hopefully people that are actively seeking out these spaces where they don't need a car or vehicle. I think prioritizing that within certain downtown transit districts, I think is important to include as we kind of revise the code. I think that'll free some stuff up. So it's kind of the shared housing model. This is more of a recommendation, honestly, for your CDA staff who've left already, unfortunately. But a social housing model, I think, is probably something we'd want to take a look at from the city side. So if we're asking about revenue over the long haul, if you look at your paycheck, and everyone can answer this question for themselves, where does most of your money go? It's to housing. So there is a lot of money. It flows to those who build housing rather than to the city or anything else. And even if the social housing product is tax exempt, there's nothing that prevents the city from having a facility and service fee that then makes up for that property tax loss. So it can actually be a net revenue generator while also being less expensive for the residents. So there's a cross subsidy that happens there, but that's I think a topic for an entire other committee. Our R2 standards, I think, are designed on purpose not to allow additional units to be built on them. I think, there's like a certain 9,000 square foot minimum to build that second unit. And most of our lots are between 5,800 to like 6,200. So there's a purposeful edit that was done there that we need to kind of go back and undo in order to allow for the triplexes and duplexes that I think would naturally go there in the R2 areas. Let's see. GDU. I do think that there is an opportunity to also touch our building codes. I know we're not doing only the land use, but I think the single stairwell amendment that LA is looking at currently might help out with your infill sites. So currently we require double loaded corridors. There is an exemption that you can place in order to allow for a single, basically, New York style walk up that will allow these smaller sites and smaller infill single lots to be developable. I think it's worth taking a look at. It allows for different types of floor layout that I think are really encouraging. It's something that I fully would support. Oh my gosh. And I would say that overall the philosophy there is rather than always looking to make the lots bigger, we should also look to encourage small lot development, right? So that infill, I don't think that always trying to get the biggest possible parcel is the end goal. I know that there are efficiencies of scales, but even our own code essentially creates that, right? So we give bonuses to the more land you acquire and the bigger the development is, it's, you can add more units, you're able to tier off to different types of apartment complexes. I just think that anything you do to make those smaller scale developments easier, we're going to see more small scale development. Another huge missing opportunity space, I think right now for additional housing are the Bristol Street Plan, right? So a Bristol Street Plan and our specific plan for Midtown, which I don't think actually includes any housing, even though it logically is the best place to add additional high-rise and intense housing along the Main Street corridor. We allow for just about anything else, but only in very specific districts, which are very hard to navigate. And I think that we really do need to take a look at general land use provisions that can be plopped down along Midtown that makes sense for what the plan already says. But whether that's urban neighborhood or whatever else the designation is there, I don't know if we have an update on it, but that's something where I think there's a lot of housing opportunity along that corridor. Let's see, industrial uses. This is actually a twofer. So my understanding is that we do allow for a caretaker unit within our industrial sites. one thing that I've never seen it actually be utilized. I don't know if that's because people don't want to use their industrial space, but if you were to allow like a single by right RV hookup where you technically have your one unit, there's still someone that's on site and they're basically plug and play with your gas, not even gas, but your electric and water hookups. So you just like plop in an RV, you get your one housing unit that's already allowed by right, but then that's also explicitly allowed in order to provide security, add the additional housing unit, and then still comply with your zoning code. I think that might be potential interest. I also think that in our true industrial areas, I'm a lot more, I guess, lenient when it comes to what the requirements and standards are. I think we had a really great example with the Segerstrom development as far as what it would take for kind of a high quality industrial building. I'm less worried about heights and setbacks there because it's an industrial area. Like I don't worry necessarily as much. I do think that you should have a well-designed and high quality product, but I don't think we should worry so much about height, setbacks, landscapes when what we're trying to do is maximize basically sales tax volume, assessment, and overall economic activity, right? I think that particular zone is really intended to produce money for the city and produce products. So that's where I'm landing on industrial. And other concerns. Let's see. So I do think that there might be some other opportunities going back to like being business friendly as far as creating proactive districts. The one that you've heard me talk about previously is around an entertainment district in the downtown. So I think that goes for like live music, beer and wine sales, and a bona fide restaurant. Like I think those should be looked at under that minor CUP procedure. I think that's a really good idea of just administratively, like everyone's saying that it takes so long to open up a business in downtown, and downtown's dying, half the places are empty. Okay, well, let's allow this type of economic activity to go in there by right and just go through a minor CUP process. I think that'll speed things along. And for those of us that were here when Jerry valiantly added tattoo parlors to the allowed uses, right? So we were here, that was Jerry, and so there was very much like a day before we allowed tattoo parlors and the day after we allowed tattoo parlors. And we just see how much economic activity there is in downtown that are related to tattoo shops. It's very much one of these things where our previous apprehension of allowing certain types of businesses actually made us less business friendly. And as soon as we got out of the way, it naturally emerged. And I think that with our hookah parlor prohibition, we'd see something very similar, right? So we have a very active Muslim and Middle Eastern community that has like just hookah use. I know it's hard with tobacco now, right? I know there's like balancing acts there, but from a cultural standpoint, they're active at the hours that we want more additional activity. There's definitely a retail sales component, so a lot of just sales tax that's associated with it. And they're relatively low cost from a capital perspective as far as starting one up. So if you were to undo that, I swear, we'd have 3 different parlors down here like within a month and a half, right? So this is something where I think there's an opportunity for economic development there. I do also think we should be a little bit more trying to figure out what we want to do with these kind of night market, Friday night munchies sort of pop-ups that aren't really pop-ups anymore. It's like a consistent land use of a particular location that's on public property. It's like, why don't we get more than $52 a day? We get the sales tax from Friday night munchies, but I think the city council was looking at it and they got like $52 for the application and that was it. I'm sure there's more money, but it's just to say that we should find ways to actively encourage those types of events to naturally happen, that we shouldn't necessarily be worried about the limitations on the day. I'd rather have more economic activity than less, unless there's a real danger. And I think that that's where the code needs to be very clear that it's a life and safety prioritization rather than, 30 sounds better than 60, so we're going to draw the line around 45. I want like a real reason to stop people from trying to do events. And I think that that's something we can do. Okay. And I think that's what I have for now.
Commissioner Benninger.
Hey, thank you. Excuse me. Yeah, I think the city does an awful lot as far as diversity types of housing. Just today, I love what we saw today with the parking beneath the structures. I think we need to encourage more of that. That is going to look like a very neat project when it's going up and running. The only thing that I would consider in the city, and I know this has a bad terminology, But prefab housing has come a long way to where we would help with the developers to be able to develop sites quickly and be able to prefab and put it in quickly. We had an AU built in my neighborhood, took them almost 6-7 months to complete. Whereas you would get it prefab, you would end up doing that very quickly. But again, there has to be standards involved with it. I also appreciate and would encourage more and more of it is input from residents, inputs from the industries. As you said, sir, yourself, all the answers will not come from us, but come from input from others. And I've always learned that talking to my operators and talking was where I got a lot of my good ideas to find out what to change and what to improve. So I really encourage continue to have those meetings. I think one thing I was discouraged with was when we talked about Lacey neighborhood to find out the businesses only met once and the neighborhoods had met 15 times. That's totally out of balance. We need to make it equal balance. Also, I'm very supportive of environmental justice. Here's a guy who's cleaned up a lot of areas, who's understand what it takes. And the only thing that I saw last week, and I really want to encourage it, let's get the data. You don't have to talk to me people in Lacey to know who the bad actor is in that neighborhood. So then why haven't we collected air samples? Why had we documented the problems we have with that person rather than let it continue? And so I would very much encourage that data. I very much enjoyed the tour that I was taken from Ricardo and from Marguerite to look at the different areas. But let's not be scared of not getting data. Things I heard about cost too much. No, it doesn't. We have a good group working in Madison Park area that already have got the sample device, can tell you the dangers of fireworks and all that's there. Let's go ahead and use them. Let's get those samples. If nothing else, let's use Draeger tubes, which is a good way for sampling chemicals inside the air. We just use them at Dow all the time. And very simple, 5 pumps, and you can say what your percentage is. But let's deal with data. We deal with data, we'll stay away from lawsuits, as well as we can show businesses that we're going to be fair. And I think that's the biggest fear that came out of this exercise we went through, is a lot of businesses feeling that the city was going to abandon them and not be fair. Because they don't want bad actors also, but they want to be treated fairly. So I think as long as we do that, that's going to be one thing that's important. I would I would like to see us develop a guideline for residential, how they can work within the code and what they need to have help with. When I upgraded the electrical in my house, it's something I do myself, but many people said, you'll never get through the city, you'll never get approved. I found the city very helpful with that. So I upgraded my power panel. And I think a guideline would have helped me better as to where I may have used or may not have used city input with it. So I think I would like to see us develop a guideline with it. But night's late. I'm going to end right there. Thank you.
Vice Chair Ramos.
I think, my goodness, did I have one last thing? I just, expanding on a question I asked earlier around the business park. So I'm just thinking about what areas in the city might be identified as potential business parks. I'm just wondering how we prioritize the competing needs and interests in having more revenue generating use and also housing. So when I think of the OC Register site, previous OC Register site, it's one of the few very large sites in the city that could be used for new development. So I just want to, I don't have like a specific recommendation, but just want to ask that we consider any larger site very carefully. And even if we did decide that something was going to be a business park, what does it look like to try to incorporate residential use in some way or open space in some way, knowing that we're built out. And then also another or general question is how do we, how do we consider those types of uses on some of these larger sites when we also have existing like vacant properties elsewhere that might be able to be used for commercial or industrial use? So just want to kind of take all of that into consideration whenever we're at a decision-making point, and also ask that city staff think about how those things get weighed, where we consider a new business park somewhere, but knowing that we have scattered sites throughout the city that may fill some of those same uses that could exist within a business park. Thank you.
Commissioner Wu.
We live in the desert, so I think you need to add that into future housing plan. You know, perhaps the natural market will happen since we have declining enrollment in the schools, which shows that, you know, we're not getting families. So if we keep saying we're going to build housing, you know, maybe we don't need to advertise it, we just do it, you know? Because I think you build up expectation, you build housing, it solves the problem. Maybe it does. It doesn't solve all the problem for all the people who need housing. And that's a bigger discussion that we need to have. The other thing is that one thing I like to see solved through zoning is no fireworks, given the fires in LA. And I'm very concerned about the illegal fireworks that I see so abundantly happen on 4th of July in this city, before and after the 4th of July. So can we have a no fireworks zone? No gun zone? I know, yeah, you carry a sword, man, you know, you don't need a gun. Gun is for wuss, yeah.
I don't know if I would promote that, Commissioner Wu. But to echo what you just shared, for diverse housing, I would almost, pose it as a challenge to some developers if they would be open to doing some sort of eco-housing, do something that's very eco-friendly, very energy efficient, if they could come to us with some sort of proposal and just like develop some sort of mini neighborhood that is like.
And have you gone by Main Place? The parking lot is down, you know, but I'm having trouble getting to Panini's because there's no parking, you know. So I don't know what is the plan for developing there, but Macy's leaving. So, you know, what is the retail market? There's a lot of shops gone at the block, you know. So we might want to rethink the old marketplace concept, going back to the Greek. What will be the new, you know, we could partner with education maybe, since they don't have room to build on campus. You know, I know in San Diego, the downtown area is taken up by the University of San Diego, doing research, having conference center and things like that. So, you know, I don't know what the answer. I'm just looking at mega trends down the line, not just what the mega trends that came up 5-6 years ago. You know, I'm not going nuts. I just work in a different world of futurists.
No, but on that same wavelength, if retail's going out and there's no businesses at some of these malls, maybe we create hotels on the mall space and make it like a very much mixed use space. I don't know. As for retaining industrial, that question stumped me because the second part of it, for addressing how it impacts homes and schools, that I just stopped because I was like, my brain can't process that one. So I'll probably send an email if I have an answer. What other issues of concerns would you like to see addressed through the zoning code? I think I liked what we saw with this last zoning conversation we had, where it was very detailed what uses can happen in this zoning section. What can you do? I think that detailed list let businesses know, hey, is your business in line with this? Great, you can absolutely do business here. It's not listed? Thanks, it's not listed. It's not listed. Thank you so much. Like, I think having language like that really, it lets people know that, hey, if it's not listed here, we love the fact that you wanted to do business here in Santa Ana, but your business cannot work in this section in Santa Ana. Maybe we can find you another zone you could possibly work in, but in this section that you're looking at, your business wouldn't be able to. I think being that detailed, I think that would work, because I think the folks that came to that meeting were able to see that detailed outline and were able to see, okay, this is what they mean, as opposed to coming in here very viscerally the first few meetings and not really understanding what was in the meeting, and Commissioner Wu being very kindly letting them know, hey, just read it and everything's listed and detailed in there. That's all I have to say on the last set of questions. Does anybody else have any comments or suggestions? If not, does anybody have any comments or questions for staff? Commissioner Benninger.
I just wanted to thank staff today, especially Siri. This is a large project. This is not easygoing, so I appreciate all the work that you're doing. I know there's a lot more to come with this. I'm really excited about the changes that we can get here, so thank you.
Commissioner Pham, Commissioner Escamilla, any comments or questions for staff?
I know that the timeline for your next update would include, I think, a draft, sorry, past my bedtime, draft zoning code, right? Do you think when you bring it to us, there would be like a sample, let's say taking R1, a sample of what the new code would be like in terms of graphics? Like you mentioned tables, you mentioned enhanced graphics. So it would be great to see just a typical page of what the zoning code would look like. Something that's easy to digest, like R1, something like that. You know, maybe an axon, like this is your house, these are your setback, things like that. That's why I think it would be, obviously you're working your consultant, so there's really not much to add on, but I've worked with some zoning codes where they're graphically, even though I do it oftentimes, it's easy for me to understand, but there are certain cities that have axons of like, this dash line is where typical easements are. This is where easement, you know, what an easement is, because as a homeowner, if someone tells them they can't build here because there's an easement, that's like 3 weeks of explaining what an easement is and why you can't see it, but it's actually there and you can't really build on it and you can't complain to the planning. So like, I think graphics would be good. Yeah. And thank you for your presentation. I don't want to add more work, but.
Commissioner Escamilla?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to thank you, Siri. This was a lot and it continues to be a lot. So I look forward to continuing to work on it. I think for me, it's just like always trying to get in front of the code. So I'm not sure if we have like a PDF access or just like the full like PDF of the entire zoning code or even just the municipal code. Like, do we just order that like from Municode as a download, or because I'm just like, I just want to like start like highlighting and like striking things through and adding notes.
Yeah, the municipal code is on the web and you can even download it as a Word document too. And I know that for anyone who's interested in totally nerding out on this in the way that Siri and I and Ricardo would, we'd be happy to also meet one-on-one too, to really take deep dives as needed on any topical areas with individual commissioners as well. So tonight's not the last conversation you're going to have. We'll welcome any continuous feedback from you, especially those of you employed by the profession as an architect or any other types of community liaisons or work that you do. You will have experiences with zoning as you keep going, and just send us your feedback. I mean, it's helpful to the overall endeavor.
All right, yeah, that's all I have for tonight. And thank you for the, oh my gosh, I already forgot what it was called. The Danish. Thank you for the Danish.
Vice Chair Ramos.
So are these just overall comments or still on this item?
Overall comment.
Okay, thank you all for being here with us for nearly 4 hours. Thank you so much for the presentation and taking all of our questions, and looking forward to what the process continues to be, and excited for the second round of community engagement as well.
Commissioner Wu.
Thank you for your presentation and staff work. There is the Economic Justice Initiative on Thursday, March 27 at 9 o'clock at the Arts and Learning Conservatory, 151 Camas Drive, Suite 03. It's an opportunity to talk about various ways that we could develop a better economy for everyone. In addition to that, there's the Affordable Housing Awards luncheon. If we haven't got tickets for that, I think Santa Ana will get well recognized, or the housing projects that you guys sponsored will at that. That's on, where is it? Anyway, there's the Affordable Housing Award breakfast that the housing groups are going to do, and Santa Ana is going to be part of that. That's at April 17th at the Orange Hill Restaurant up on the hill above Al Medina, where the people to go to the bathroom up here and it goes downhill to Al Medina. Yes. Okay. So.
Thank you so much, staff, for another great presentation. A lot of information. Thank you so much. I jokingly told Ricardo that this is going to be a short meeting, and I was completely wrong. With that, this meeting is adjourned. The next regular meeting is scheduled for April 14, 2025 at 5:30 p.m. Have a good night, y'all.